in an era where your biggest worry wasn't Wi-Fi connectivity, but the shear that seeped through the thin mattress beneath you. The year is 1851, and you, a young woman named Eleanor, arrived at your new post as a scullery maid in the sprawling London townhouse of the esteemed Mr. Abernathy. Romanticized images of rosy-cheeked girls in pristine white aprons humming cheerful tunes as they polish silver is far grittier, far more demanding, and infinitely less glamorous. The faint, stale scent of coal smoke and unwashed linens to the air, a constant reminder of the relentless work that awaits. Your hands, of relative comfort, already ache with a phantom pain, anticipating the hours of scrubbing and scoring ahead. Filtering through the small, grimy window of your attic room offers little cheer. Hewn wooden walls and the sparse, shared sleeping quarters. This is not a dream. This is your new life. Day by day you learn your first morning began before the sun even considered gracing the smoky London sky. Clang of a bell, rung by the formidable housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, jolted you from a restless slumber. You scrambled out of your straw-stuffed mattress, the rough burlap scratching against your skin, and pulled on your coarse, grey wool dress, the fabric stiff and unforgiving. The chill of the stone floor leached into your bare feet as you hurried to the wash basin. The water stung your face, but there was no time for lingering. Down in the labyrinthine kitchens, already thick with the smell of simmering gruel and the sharp tang of lye soap. This was the heart of the house. Constant motion and deafening noise. The clatter of pots and pans echoed off the vaulted ceilings. From the massive copper boiler, a perpetual soundtrack, your task to scrub the mountains of dishes, pots, pans that had accumulated overnight. The water was never hot enough, and the soap, though powerful, left your hands raw and red, cracking and bleeding by midday. You learn to work through the pain, the sting of the lie a constant companion. Abernathy's townhouse, located on a respectable street in Bloomsbury, presented a facade of elegant respectability to the outside world. Inside, however, the machinery of domestic service hummed with a brutal efficiency. The ground floor was a symphony of polished mahogany, upholstery, and the gleam of gaslight. But your domain was the basement and the attic. The basement, a damp, echoing space. Kitchens, the scullery, and the servants' quarters. Here, the air was perpetually thick with the scent of roasting meats, boiling veggies, and the ever-present odor of the privy chute that ran through the building. The scullery, your primary battlefield, cramped room with a single, soot-stained window offering a meager view of the cobbled alleyway. The sink was a vast stone trough, overflowing with greasy water. The coal scuttles were heavy, the fires in the kitchen stoves demanding constant attention. Sheer volume of cleaning required was staggering. You learned to navigate the narrow corridors, avoiding the glare of the upper-class residents and the stern gaze of Mrs. Davies. Your first interaction with Mrs. Chilling introduction to the hierarchy of the household. She was a woman whose face seemed permanently set in a grim expression, her starched white cap a stark contrast to the dark circles under her eyes. "Eleanor," she'd barked, like the crack of a whip. "The silver needs polishing before the master's dinner, and not a smudge, mind you. Everything." You nodded, your stomach churning, and spent the next 3 hours hunched over a small table, rubbing silver polish onto tarnished spoons and forks, the metallic tang of the polish filling your nostrils. Involved in bringing a dull piece of silver back to a brilliant shine was immense, requiring a combination of brute force and delicate precision. I discovered in archives that a maid's hands were often a map of her life, and scarred from the constant work. Day by day, you learn, anticipate the needs of the family before they are even voiced. You learn the specific way Mrs. Abernathy liked her tea weak, a single lump of sugar served in her favourite porcelain cup. You learn that Master Thomas, the eldest son, had a penchant for leaving his boots by the drawing room fire, requiring you to retrieve them and clean them without complaint. You interpret the subtle shifts in the household's rhythm, the quiet before a dinner party, the flurry of activity on laundry day. Also learn the unspoken rules of the servants' hall, the camaraderie and the quiet resentments that simmered beneath the surface. The cook, a stout woman with perpetually flour-dusted hands, who dispensed grudging advice and the occasional extra crust of bread. And then there was young Sarah, a tweeny maid, barely older than yourself, who was often the target of Mrs. Davies's ire. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, you found yourself sharing a moment of quiet with Mary in the dimly lit kitchen. The lingering scent of roasted lamb still hung in the air, comforting aroma of baking bread. "It's a hard life, lass," Mary said, her voice soft as she stirred a pot of stew. "Used to it, you have to." She gestured with her ladle towards the overflowing sink. "See that? Whole world now, clean and then dirty again, over and over." You nodded, your own hands aching, wool of your apron a familiar texture against your skin. You thought of your family back in the countryside, open fields and the clean air, and a pang of homesickness, sharp and unexpected, pierced through the weariness. You realized then that this wasn't just about physical labor. It was about a complete immersion into a life dictated by the needs and whims of others, a life stripped of personal agency. The sheer volume of work, often involving tasks like emptying chamber pots or scrubbing floors with harsh chemicals, far cry from the gentle domesticity often depicted in popular culture. In 1851, a maid could easily stretch to 14-16 hours, with very few days off. The sheer physical toll was immense. By the end of the first week, your muscles screamed with a constant, dull ache. Your feet throbbed with every step, soles of your worn shoes offering little comfort. The constant exposure to water and harsh cleaning agents had left your skin chapped and sore, prone to small cuts that stung mercilessly. Simple act of lifting a bucket of water could feel like an insurmountable task. You learned to pace yourself, to conserve your energy, but the relentless demands of the household left little room for rest. The food, while plentiful, monotonous, gruel for breakfast, a simple stew or cold meat for dinner, and perhaps a slice of bread and cheese before bed. Little in the way of variety or indulgence. You longed for the taste of fresh fruit, for a moment of simple pleasure, but such things were luxuries far beyond your reach. This was the stark reality of Victorian domestic service, a world of relentless toil hidden behind the gilded facades of wealth and privilege. The romanticized image of the Victorian maid, perpetuated by literature and film, fails to capture the grueling physical demands, the low wages, precarious living conditions faced by these women. As the evening drew in, the gaslights flickered to life in the main rooms, shadows across the polished floors. You could hear the murmur of conversation from the drawing room, the clinking of glasses of the Abernathy family. It was a world away from the dim, echoing silence of the scullery. You knew that your own evening was far from over. There were still lamps to be trimmed, fires to be banked, final sweep of the kitchen floor to be done. As you stood there, the faint scent of beeswax polish and the lingering aroma of coal smoke filling your senses, you understood the true meaning of service. constant, often invisible labor, a life dedicated to the comfort and convenience of others. Tomorrow, the bell would ring again and the cycle would begin anew. This was just the beginning of your education, necessary lesson in what it truly meant to be a Victorian maid. You wouldn't last a day if you expected anything less than this relentless reality. But as you prepare for another day, resilience ignites within you, a quiet determination to simply survive, and perhaps, just perhaps, this hidden world. Next, we delve into the intricate rules and expectations that governed every aspect of a maid's life. Posture, as you teach, as you settle it in tight, let me transport you to a world both alien and achingly familiar. Romanticized notions of corseted elegance and genteel whispers. Today, the postcard images and into the stark reality of a young woman's first day in service. Imagine the year is 1888. The fog clings to the cobblestone streets of London, muffling the clop of horses and the distant cries of street vendors. A girl of 16, fresh from a rural village in Kent, entire world contained within the rough-spun fabric of your only good dress. Your hands still soft from tending the family garden. Slightly as you clutch a worn leather valise, its contents meager a change of undergarments, a small Bible, and a faded ribbon. Number 17, Belgrave Square, a grand townhouse owned by the esteemed Lord Ashworth. This edifice seemed to exude an aura of power and privilege, a stark contrast to the humble cottage you left behind. Here is different, tinged with a scent of coal smoke, horse manure, and something else, a perfumed Spätzle that speaks of wealth you can only imagine. You've heard tales, of course, whispered by those who'd been to the city, the vast kitchens, the gleaming silver, the endless corridors. But nothing truly prepares you for the sheer scale of it. Slab of polished oak swings open before you even reach it, revealing a stern-faced butler, Mr. Davies, starched collar so stiff it seems to hold his head at a permanent angle. His gaze, sharp and appraising, sweeps over you on your worn boots and the slight tremble in your hands. You'll be Eliza, I presume. His voice is a low rumble. Yes, sir, you manage, your voice barely a whisper. Follow me. He leads you into a vast hall. From the gas lamps glints off polished marble floors and the rich mahogany of a sweeping staircase. The silence is profound, the soft echo of your footsteps. You notice the intricate patterns woven into the Persian rugs, drapes that obscure the windows, and the sheer overwhelming sense of order. This isn't just a house, meticulously managed machine. Time moves differently when you are a new girl in service. Each minute stretches into an eternity, anticipation that hums beneath your skin. Mr. Davies ushers you into a cramped, dimly lit room off the main kitchen. Other girls, Agnes and Betsy, are already busily polishing brass candlesticks. Here is thick with the smell of beeswax and the faint, lingering aroma of yesterday's roasting meat. Agnes, a girl with sharp and a smudge of soot on her cheek, looks up. Another one, Welcome to the grind, dearie. Her voice is raspy, years of hard work. Betsy, younger and more timid, offers a shy smile. Don't mind Agnes. Since she was 12, she's seen it all. You nod, feeling a surge of awkwardness. Stomach churns with a mixture of hunger and apprehension. You haven't eaten since a meager breakfast of bread and weak tea. Of simmering broth from the kitchens only intensifies your discomfort. Right then, Mr. Davies announces, his voice cutting through the quiet. Your duties begin immediately. Eliza, you're to assist Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper. Agnes, you're on dusting the drawing room. Betsy, You'll be helping with the boot cleaning in the scullery. He hands Eliza a rough linen apron and a small stack of rough, greyish towels. Lord Ashworth expects everything to be spotless. Mrs. Gable, a formidable woman whose face is etched with the lines of constant vigilance, appears at the doorway, her grey hair so tightly it seems to stretch her skin, her hands gnarled and red from years of hot water and harsh soap. "Come on along, girl," she barks, her voice as sharp as a needle. "Don't just stand there gawking. Washing to be done, and it won't do itself." You follow her into a cavernous room, hay with steam, and the pungent scent of lye soap. Rows of wash tubs stretch across the floor, filled with scalding water, oppressive, and the sheer volume of soiled linens, shirts, sheets, tablecloths is overwhelming. You've never seen so much washing in your life. Back home, a few shifts and a couple of sheets might take a day. Here, looks like it would take a week. First, you'll be scrubbing these. Mrs. Gable instructs, to a pile of particularly grimy shirts. Use plenty of soap. You don't scald your hands. Your hands shake as you plunge them into the steaming water. The heat is almost unbearable. Fabric chafes against your skin. You begin to scrub, the rhythm monotonous, your muscles quickly aching. The ingrained dirt that no amount of scrubbing seems to dislodge, a testament to the lives lived within these walls, and leisure that are the direct opposite of yours. Differently, when your entire existence is dictated by the chime of bells and the demands of others. Good day of a maid doesn't begin when the sun rises, but long before, in the pre-dawn darkness. You learn that your own needs, hunger, thirst, exhaustion, are secondary to the needs of the household. A single misplaced item, a forgotten chore, can result in a sharp reprimand or worse, a docked wage. As you scrub, you hear the muffled sounds of life from the floors above, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of voices, burst of laughter. It's a world away from the steamy basement where you now toil. You recall a conversation with your mother before you left. Remember your manners, Eliza, and work hard. But work hard feels like an understatement now. This is back. This breaking, soul-crushing labor. Archives that the average Victorian maid worked 12, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Their wages were often meager to cover the cost of their own food and lodging, which was usually provided in cramped attics or basements. Social lives were virtually non-existent, their contact with the outside world strictly controlled. You look at your hands, raw and red, the skin pruny from the prolonged immersion in hot water. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow there will be more washing, scrubbing, more endless tasks. You think of the warmth of your family hearth, the smell of baking bread, simple joy of an evening spent singing songs. It feels like a lifetime ago. Suddenly, a sharp clang echoes through the room. "Girls," Mrs. Gable calls out, her voice a weary sigh. Luncheon, you discover, is a meagre affair. Bread and a bowl of watery gruel. It's a stark contrast to the aromas wafting from the dining room above. Ashworth family is likely enjoying a hearty meal of roasted fowl and fine wines. You eat quickly, still a knot of anxiety, aware that the reprieve is short-lived. As you return to the laundry tubs, drifts through your mind a comparison to your own time. Imagine, if you will, a modern apartment dweller complaining about a slow internet connection. It's a world away from the physical demands of Eliza's existence, where a single day's work could leave you utterly depleted, with no immediate recourse except to face the next day's toil. Wears on, the steam and the scrubbing blurring into a monotonous cycle. The initial fear has begun to be replaced by a dull ache in your muscles and a growing sense of resignation. Agnes' eye across the room. She offers a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of shared hardship. It's a small comfort, a tiny beacon in the overwhelming tide of labor. That survival in this world means finding these small moments of connection, these glimmers of shared humanity, casting long shadows across the laundry room. Mrs. Gable finally dismisses you. See that you're up and ready by 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. She instructs, her voice carrying a hint of fatigue. The ironing to be done. You return to the small, shared dormitory with the scent of unwashed bodies and stale air. The straw-filled mattress feels lumpy and unforgiving beneath you. You lie there, listening to the sounds of the city outside, the distant rumble of a train, cry of a dog, and the rhythmic breathing of Agnes and Betsy beside you. Your body aches, your hands sting, races with the sheer enormity of what lies ahead. This is service. This is what a Victorian maid was really like. Begun to understand. Next time, we'll delve deeper into the hierarchy of the house, the subtle rules of etiquette, the constant threat of dismissal that hung over every maid. The weight of history settles gently on your shoulders as our story begins, not with a grand pronouncement, but with the chilling scrape of a chamber pot against unforgiving flagstones. You are Agnes, 17, newly arrived at the imposing edifice of Blackwood Manor, nestled in the damp, rolling countryside of Surrey, England. Our Lord 1888, a time of gaslight and corsets, of rigid social strata and unspoken expectations. Initiation into the labyrinthine world of domestic service has been swift and brutal, icy waters from which there is no immediate escape. Forget the romanticized notions of the past. This is the reality of a Victorian maid's existence, a life dictated by the chiming of clocks and the imperious dictates of those you serve. Every day that follows is pre-dawn. The chill seeps through the thin straw mattress and your threadbare chemise, constant biting companion. The dormitory, shared with 6 other girls, smells perpetually of damp wool, stale sweat, and the faint moonlight. A pale, watery disk through the grimy window pane offers little comfort. Your first task, first hint of dawn paints the sky, is to retrieve the chamber pots from each of the family's bedrooms. Task undertaken in near total darkness, your bare feet padding silently on the cold, polished floorboards of the upper corridors. The air is heavy with the scent of lavender polish and the lingering aroma of yesterday's roasted meats, a stark contrast to the raw, earthy reality of your duties. You must be invisible, a shadow moving through the sleeping house, acknowledged only by the click of a latch or the rustle of your grey uniform. Experience becomes your teacher, a harsh but thorough instructor. Unwritten rules of Blackwood Manor are as numerous and complex as the intricate patterns woven into the Persian carpets that adorn the downstairs rooms. First rule, the absolute bedrock of your existence, is hierarchy. You are at the very bottom, below the scullery maids, kitchen staff, below the footman, below even the elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, whose sharp eyes miss nothing. Themselves Lord Ashworth, a man whose booming voice could curdle milk, Lady Ashworth, a creature of porcelain fragility and sharp pronouncements, and their 2 daughters, Miss Eleanor and Miss Victoria, dictated your every move, are the suns around which your small world revolved. The morning room, space of chintz and polished mahogany, is where the day truly begins for the family. Your role here is specific. Silver tea service gleams, the damask napkins are perfectly folded, and the morning papers are laid out, uncreased. Ashworth's favourite armchair. Lady Ashworth's instructions delivered in a voice as thin and sharp as a new pin, with a sigh that implies your inherent inadequacy. Agnes, she'd say, her gaze sweeping over your bowed head, be precisely golden, not a shade darker, not a shade lighter, and for goodness sake, mind the crumbs, everything. The clink of porcelain teacups and the murmur of polite conversation. A world away from the clatter and shouts of the servants' quarters is the soundtrack to your morning. Anticipate needs before they are voiced, to move with an almost preternatural quietness, to be present yet unseen. The kitchen, cavernous space that perpetually smells of wood smoke, roasting meat and simmering stews, is the heart of the servants' domain. Here, a formidable woman named Martha, with arms like rolling pins and a temper to match, presides, is absolute within these walls. Right then, girl? Cook would bark the stone walls as you deposited the filled chamber pots into the slop bucket. No dawdling. Potatoes need peeling, and mind you don't leave any eyes on them. Ashworth can't abide an eye in his mash. The rhythmic scrape of your peeler against the waxy potato skin, the hiss of steam from the massive copper pots, the clang of metal on metal, these are the sounds that fill your days. To handle hot iron skillets without flinching, to carry trays laden with heavy dishes without spilling a drop, relentless heat, and the constant demands you discover through sheer necessity. Weave of your apron can be used to quickly dry your hands, that a well-placed foot can steady a wobbling stack of plates. Glance at the cook's narrowed eyes can tell you if you're about to be summoned for reprimand or dismissed with a grunt. This is where you learn the practicalities, the Tao of servitude. The afternoon brings its own set of rituals. For you, be polishing the endless expanse of brass fittings that adorn every doorway, metallic, sharp, and lingering on your fingertips. It's dusting the delicate porcelain figurines that crowd the drawing room mantelpiece. Potential casualty of a clumsy movement, the soft velvet of the upholstery, the cool, smooth surface of the marble busts, the intricate carvings on the antique furniture. These are the textures of your world. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, measured beat, marks the slow passage of time. Overhear snippets of conversation from the family, discussions of politics, of social engagements, fashion, a distant, unattainable realm. You learn to interpret the subtle shifts in tone, spoken messages conveyed through a raised eyebrow or a dismissive wave of the hand. Memorable afternoon involved a misunderstanding with Miss Eleanor. She had requested a specific shade of blue ribbon for her hair, a shade I, in my naivete, had interpreted as a common robin's egg blue. As it turned out, was a far more subtle, almost greyish hue, a colour I had never encountered before. Lady Ashworth let out a gasp of pure horror. Agnes, what is this atrocity? Have you no eye for colour whatsoever? This is not the cerulean I described. It is common. The shame burned in my cheeks, hotter than any reprimand from cook. I was sent back to the linen closet, sort and fold the endless piles of sheets and pillowcases until the offending ribbon was retrieved and replaced. Scent of lavender and the rough texture of linen filled my senses as I worked, my mind replaying Lady Ashworth's cutting words, taught me the crucial lesson that even the smallest detail, the subtlest shade, importance in the eyes of the gentry. It reinforced the absolute necessity of precise observation and unwavering obedience. It was like being sent back to fix a typo in an email that the CEO had already read and found offensive. Descends, bringing with it the preparation for dinner. The dining room, a grand affair of dark wood and gleaming silverware, requires meticulous attention. You are responsible for laying the table, ensuring each fork, knife, and spoon is placed at the correct angle. Symphony of polished metal, the scent of beeswax polish and wilting roses from the centerpiece fills the air. Recognize the distinct weight of each piece of cutlery, the cool, smooth feel of the linen napkins against your skin. Imperceptible clink as you place each item. You also learn to avoid eye contact, to remain a peripheral presence, a ghost in the polished silver. As the family dines, you are often tasked with serving. This is a moment of extreme tension. Table side lightly, your tray held steady, your gaze fixed on the space just above the heads of the diners. Dishes with grace, ensuring no food spills, no clatter disturbs the conversation. Spoon could be a minor embarrassment. A dropped roast chicken would be a disaster of epic proportions, to immediate dismissal. You learn to gauge the precise moment to offer a refill of wine. Without brushing against anyone, the aroma of roasted pheasant and rich gravy, scent that only serves to highlight your own meager supper, wafts around you. You are a conduit, a silent server. Hunger, a secondary concern to the satisfaction of your employers. The day concludes much as it began. Duties of preparing the house for the night. Beds are turned down. Fires are banked. Vestiges of the day's activity are tidied away. You return to the dormitory. Stone floors, a familiar sensation once more. The weight of the day's labor presses down on your young shoulders, manifestation of the rigid structure you inhabit. Tomorrow will be much the same, a repetition of tasks, a constant striving for invisibility and perfection. The sheer endurance required is immense, a testament to the resilience of those who lived these lives. As you drift off to sleep, ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, muffled by distance and the thick manor walls, serves as a lullaby of sorts. Reminder that time for you is not measured in personal moments of joy or rest, but in the efficient completion of tasks, running of the household. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin anew, and you will be expected to rise to the occasion. The silent, efficient automaton that Blackwood Manor demands. And in the quiet of the dormitory, as the other girls' soft snores fill the air, you can't help but wonder if there's more to life than this relentless adherence to the rules of the house. Unwavering dedication to service is the core of your existence. But the whispers of the world beyond these walls, of freedom and choice, begin to stir within you, a subtle rebellion against the carefully constructed order. Drift back to an age when the very concept of normal was radically different, when the dawn wasn't heralded by the insistent chirp of a smartphone alarm, but by the chilling draft that seeped through poorly sealed window panes and the distant rhythmic clatter of coal being delivered. A scullery maid in the grand, imposing residence of Lord Ashworth, nestled on the outskirts of London in the year of our Lord. The air in your cramped attic room, shared with two other girls, smells perpetually of damp wool and stale sweat, even before your eyes fully adjust to the meager pre-dawn light filtering through a sliver of window. Familiar ache in your bones, a constant companion born of relentless labor. The straw mattress offers little comfort, its scratchy surface a stark contrast to the soft linens you'll soon be expected to plump for your betters. Your rough linen shift the coarse fabric scratching against your skin and tie it with a worn drawstring. The grey serge dress, stiff and unforgiving, its hem reaching your ankles. A white cotton cap, to a crisp that will soon be lost to the grime of the day, is pinned firmly onto your coiled hair, lingering, no space for introspection. The house itself seems to exhale a silent command, Ev work. The weeks pass and you discover that the unwritten rules are not merely guidelines, but the very structure of your existence. Tapestry of duties that leaves no room for deviation. Your day begins not with a gentle awakening. Plunge into activity. The first task before the first hint of rose in the eastern sky is to descend to the scullery. Stone, floored room is the heart of the house's unseen labour. The air here is thick with the acrid scent of lye soap, tang of iron pots, and the lingering aroma of yesterday's cooking, roasted meats, boiled vegetables, present smell of coal smoke. The massive cast iron range, a hungry beast, needs to be stoked and kept alight from dawn till dusk. Heavy sacks of coal, your small frame straining under the weight, the gritty dust coating your hands and face, casting dancing shadows on the damp stone walls, a necessary warmth against the pervasive chill. Then the washing. Plates, platters, tureens, cutlery, each piece must be scrubbed with a stiff brush and scalding water. Be rinsed in colder water and dried with a rough linen cloth. Your hands, already raw and chapped from the cold and the harsh soaps, sting with every immersion. The water, heated in enormous copper boilers, is a constant battle to maintain at the correct temperature. Perpetually on your feet, your back aching from bending over the heavy sinks. You learn to gauge the right amount of soap, precise pressure needed to dislodge stubborn grease without scratching the delicate china. The clatter of crockery is the soundtrack to your morning, a relentless symphony of potential disaster. A single dropped plate can mean a sharp reprimand or worse, deduction from your meager wages. I discovered in the house's old ledgers archive that a maid in 1875 was docked a week's pay for breaking a single crystal wine glass. The weeks pass and you discover that the scullery is merely the starting point. Once the breakfast dishes are cleared, expand outwards, demanding a similar meticulousness throughout the entire house. Carry hot water in heavy pitchers from the scullery to the various bedrooms, ensuring the baths are filled to the precise temperature requested by Lord Ashworth and Lady Ashworth. The weight of these pitchers, sloshing precariously, strains your arms and shoulders. You navigate the grand, echoing hallways, polished parquet floors, a treacherous expanse. The silence of the upper floors is a stark contrast to the clatter of the scullery that amplifies the sound of your own footsteps and the thumping of your heart. In the drawing room, you must dust every surface, ornate vase, every framed portrait with a feathered duster. The dust motes, disturbed by your movements, shafts of sunlight that penetrate the heavy velvet curtains. You must polish the silver, process that requires a specific cloth and polish, ensuring each fork and spoon gleams with an almost blinding brilliance. This isn't a quick wipe, it's a ritual. You learn to differentiate between the various types of silver and the appropriate cleaning methods. I learned through reading a treatise on domestic management from the era. Tarnished silver was considered a sign of slovenliness and could reflect poorly on the entire household. Pass and you discover that the demands extend to the very fabric of the house. You are responsible for emptying chamber pots, physically unpleasant and imbued with a certain social stigma, even within the maid hierarchy. You carry these heavy, porcelain vessels, their contents a stark reminder of the human needs that undergird the grandeur. You empty them into the privy outside, biting at your exposed hands. You must also manage the fires in the sitting rooms and libraries, ensuring they are kept at a comfortable warmth throughout the day, adding logs and tending the embers with a poker. The smell of burning wood, becomes a constant, pervasive odor that clings to your clothes and hair. Then there are the personal errands. Newspaper for Lord Ashworth, ensuring his slippers are placed by his favourite armchair. Messages to other members of the household. Each task requires promptness and discretion. You learn to anticipate needs, silently and efficiently, becoming a ghost in the periphery of the aristocratic life. Memorable day involved Lady Ashworth's desire for fresh flowers for her reception. You were dispatched to the greenhouse, fragrant space, to select specific blooms, roses, lilies, and a sprig of lavender for its calming scent. Arrange them precisely in a crystal vase, ensuring the water was fresh and the stems trimmed at the correct angle. The pressure to make them look perfect was immense, as Lady Ashworth was known for her discerning eye. "Eliza," she had said, clear chime, "these roses are not quite vibrant enough. See if you can find some with a deeper hue." Her words, overtly harsh, carried the weight of expectation, a subtle reminder of your place. Pass, and you discover that the end of the day brings no true rest. Meal has been served and the dining room cleared. There are still more dishes to wash, more fires to bank for the night, for the beds to be turned down. You must ensure all the candles are extinguished, the doors locked, settled into slumber. The sheer physical exhaustion is a constant, dull ache. Your muscles scream, your feet throb. Mind, though weary, is still trained to listen for any sound that might indicate a need. The moment you can finally crawl back into your straw-filled bed, the rough wool blanket a welcome, if meager, comfort. The silence of your shared room is a blessed relief, a temporary reprieve before the cycle begins anew. This relentless rhythm, unceasing demand for physical exertion and silent obedience, is what it truly meant to be a maid. It wasn't about the romanticized notion of service, but about a life dictated by the needs of others, a life lived in the background, sheer endurance. The weeks pass, and you learn that survival is not about skill alone, but about an almost animalistic capacity to push through the pain, the fatigue, and the soul-crushing monotony. Towards sleep tonight, consider the sheer, unyielding labor that underpinned the comfort of those who lived in such houses, and the invisible hands that made their lives flow so smoothly day after day. Tomorrow we will delve deeper into the subtle, yet powerful, social dynamics that govern these relationships, the unspoken language of deference and command. I told you that everything you thought you knew about this period was incomplete, lost in the cacophony of grand balls and gaslit streets. You imagine the silk rustling, the polite conversation, arranged bouquets, but beneath the polished veneer a different reality pulsed, a relentless, steaming engine that kept the entire edifice functioning. Tonight, we descend into that engine room, the scullery and kitchen, heart of the house, and its fiery, unforgiving core. Teach you to anticipate the chill that seeps from the stone floors, even in the height of summer, clings to your worn cotton dress like a second skin. You wake not to the gentle chime of a bedside clock, to the clatter of metal and the low murmur of voices already at work. Your hands, still raw from yesterday's scrubbing, reach for the rough wool of your apron, the familiar weight a small comfort. The air, even before dawn, is thick with the lingering ghosts of yesterday's meals, the faint, greasy tang of rendered fat, the ghost of cabbage, present scent of wood smoke. You pull on your stout, leather-soled shoes, the soles thick enough to offer some protection. Entirely banish the biting cold of the flagstones. The scullery, it's a world away from the airy drawing rooms above, is dim, filtering through small, grimy windows set high in the walls, often streaked with condensation and soot. The dominant sounds are the relentless rush of water from the cold tap, always the cold tap, as hot water is a precious commodity, the clang of pots and pans, and the rhythmic scrape of brushes against earthenware and pewter. Your first task, the first rays of sun touch the roof, is to tackle the mountain of dishes from the previous night's dinner. Imagine, encrusted with gravy, silver serving spoons dulled with use, bearing the faint lipstick traces of ladies who would never set foot in this subterranean realm. Your hands, that is icy, stinging the skin and making your knuckles turn white. You work by the light of a single, sputtering tallow candle, its weak flame casting dancing shadows that make the piled dishes seem to writhe. The soap is harsh, based compound that strips the natural oils from your skin, leaving it perpetually dry and prone to cracking. To work quickly, efficiently, every movement honed by repetition. There's no time for contemplation, no room for complaint. A woman of formidable girth and even more formidable temper will be inspecting your work soon. Lingering grace or food scraps will earn you a tongue lashing that can feel as scalding as the steam from a boiling pot. Teach you that the kitchen itself is a crucible, the massive cast iron range, the heart of this operation, a heat that is both essential and oppressive. Even on a cool morning, the air within the kitchen is stifling, a thick blanket of warmth generated by the ever-burning coals. You can feel the heat on your face, in your hair, clinging to your clothes. The smell here is different from the scullery. It's a potent blend of roasting meats, baking bread, simmering stocks. Present aroma are of burning wood. Sweat trickles down your back, pooling in the small of your neck, constantly wiping your brow with the back of your hand, a gesture that only smears the grime further across your skin, is a mosaic of spilled ingredients and dropped scraps, perpetually damp and slippery. You are expected to sweep it constantly, losing battle. The sheer volume of food being prepared is staggering. Teach you the precise art of vegetable preparation. You sit on a low stool, a mountain of potatoes before you, in your hand. Your fingers move with practiced speed, peeling away the earthy skins, aiming for minimal waste. Be uniform, ready for boiling or roasting. Then come the carrots, their rough skins scraped away, the tops trimmed, their pungent fumes stinging your eyes. Must be finely chopped, their layers separating under your blade. To work without looking, your fingers accustomed to the feel of the vegetables, the subtle resistance of the skin. Snap of a fresh stalk, it's a monotonous, back-breaking task performed day in and day out, sometimes for hours on end. In archives from the early 1880s that a single large household could consume hundreds of pounds of potatoes in a week. The vast quantities of other produce. This wasn't just cooking, it was industrial-scale food production for a small army. Teach you to anticipate the rhythm of the day. The morning rush of breakfast preparation. Morning lull where you might be called upon to polish silver or clean lamps, and then the relentless preparation for luncheon. It's the daunting task of clearing, washing, and then preparing for dinner, the most elaborate meal of the day. The cook will be barking orders, the kitchen boys will be stoking the fires, and you will be moving from one task to another, motion. You might be tasked with fetching ingredients from the larder, a cool, dimly lit space filled with the scent of cured meat, preserves. You'll need to measure out flour, sugar, and spices with precision, ensuring nothing is wasted. be asked to whip cream by hand, your arm aching from the repetitive motion, or to churn butter of the plunger, a familiar sound. The months teach you about the hierarchy even within this hot, chaotic space. The head cook reigns supreme, her word law. Below her are the kitchen maids, each with their specific duties. There's the pastry cook, all the baking, her hands perpetually dusted with flour. There's the scullery maid, sole responsibility is the endless washing of dishes. And then there are general kitchen maids like yourself, assist wherever needed. You might hear a brief, sharp exchange between Mrs. Davies and the butler, Mr. Finch. Starched collar seemed to reflect his unyielding demeanour. The consommé, Mrs. Davies, Finch might say, but carrying an edge, but appears to be a trifle thin this evening. His lordship prefers a richer consistency. Mrs. Davies, paying sweat from her brow with a corner of her apron, would retort, prefer my staff to understand the difference between a simmer and a boil, Mr. Finch. The beef was of the finest quality. For precisely 4 hours, these small skirmishes are the only breaks in the relentless work. Teach you that the glamour of the Victorian era is a carefully constructed illusion built upon the unseen, celebrated labor of countless women like you. It's a stark contrast to today, where we can summon a meal with a few clicks on a screen, our groceries delivered to our door. Physical exertion required to feed a wealthy household in the 19th century is almost unimaginable to us now. Constant heat, of stinging soaps, of aching muscles, and of a pervasive, inescapable grime. As the evening draws to a close, of the dishes have been scrubbed and put away, you finally have a moment to yourself. Your body aches with a deep, weary exhaustion. You catch your reflection in a darkened window pane, a smudge of soot on your cheek, a stray strand of hair escaping your cap, your hands rough and chapped. Yet, there's a quiet resilience there. Survived another day. Tomorrow will bring the same demands, the same heat, the same relentless cycle. But for now, quiet of the scullery, broken only by the gentle drip of water from a leaky tap, offers a brief respite. Tomorrow, however, and you'll begin to understand the intricate dance of service that extends far beyond the kitchen walls, unspoken expectations and carefully guarded secrets, yourself stepping through time into a world that operated by entirely different rules, a world where your very existence was defined not by your thoughts or dreams, but by the fabric you wore. Part 6 of Historian Sleepy delves into the profound significance of the maid's uniform that was far more than mere clothing. It was a declaration of social standing, a shield of anonymity, and a cage for individuality. As you settle in tonight, let the weight of this realization settle gently on your shoulders, much like the stiff collar you might have worn. Perspective shifts when you consider the uniform not as a choice but as an imposition. Imagine waking before dawn, unheated room seeping into your bones. You reach for your uniform, laid out meticulously the night before. Personal taste. It's a matter of duty and identity. The fabric is usually coarse, a durable cotton or linen. Practicality rather than comfort. The color is almost invariably black or a dark gray. Hides stains and signifies somber obedience. The cut is severe, modest to a fault, with long sleeves and a high neckline. Any hint of personal form, a crisp white apron, immaculately starched, is always worn over the dark dress. This apron, symbol of purity and service, also serves to further delineate the maid from the mistress of the house. It's a visual shorthand, communicating your role and your place in the domestic hierarchy. Think of the details, subtle yet powerful messages they convey. The starched white cap often adorned with a simple ribbon, signifies your unmarried status and your position within the household. A married woman, a housekeeper perhaps, a different style of cap, or none at all, a visual marker of her established place. Your shoes are sturdy, sensible, endless hours of standing and walking, not for elegance. Even the way your hair is styled is dictated, pulled back tightly and hidden beneath your cap. Any stray tendrils are a sign of slovenliness. This uniformity extends to every maid in service, regardless of her age, background, or personal aspirations. You are not you, the maid. Your perspective shifts when you consider the profound impact of this enforced anonymity. Society that valued outward appearances and social distinctions above all else. Uniform was a masterstroke of social engineering. It stripped away individuality, interchangeable in the eyes of the world and often in the eyes of their employers. You are not Sarah, with her quiet wit and love of poetry. You are simply the maid. You are not Eleanor, who dreams of escaping to the countryside, one who polishes the silver. This anonymity, while offering a degree of protection from unwanted attention, also served to suppress any burgeoning sense of self. It was a constant, tangible reminder that your purpose was to serve into the background, to be a functional part of the household machinery, not a distinct individual. Let's delve deeper into this visual language. In a grand house like Bletchley Park in Buckinghamshire, very walls whispered secrets during wartime. The domestic staff would have been equally uniformed, with subtle variations depending on their specific duties. A scullery maid might wear a coarser fabric, a more robust apron, while a lady's maid, closer to the family's personal lives, might have a slightly more refined uniform, still adhering to the strictures of modesty and service. In the archives of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, that by the mid-Victorian era, regulations for domestic staff of uniforms were being circulated, a growing awareness of the need for order and visual consistency within large households. These weren't just suggestions, often unspoken, but firmly enforced expectations. Consider a conversation you might overhear between two maids in the servants' hall during a rare moment of respite. "Did you see Mrs. Gable's new bonnet?" One might whisper, above the clatter of dishes being washed nearby. "Such silk and feathers!" The other, on her apron, might sigh. "Our aprons are a sight by now. Swear this starch is going to crack my fingers." At least they're all the same. The first replies, a hint of resignation in her tone. "No one can tell if you're the new girl or the one who's been here 10 years with these caps on." This exchange, simple as it is, reveals the double-edged nature of the uniform, fosters a sense of shared experience, identity as maids, but it also highlights the erasure of personal history and individual wear and tear, a communal anonymity, a shared invisibility. Your perspective shifts when you realize this uniformity extended beyond mere appearance. Your interactions, your demeanor, even your language. You were expected to be deferential, to speak only when spoken to, respectful distance from your employers. Any deviation from this prescribed behavior could lead to reprimand, or worse. This wasn't just about following rules, it was about internalizing a subservient identity. You are a maid in a London townhouse in the 1880s. The air in the servants' quarters is thick with the scent of coal smoke and boiled cabbage. You've just finished polishing the silver, aching from the repetitive motion. You are wearing your uniform, the dark, heavy dress, the starched apron, the neat cap. Drawing room to serve tea, you see the family gathered, the mistress adorned in velvet and lace, retly styled. barely glances at you. The children, dressed in miniature versions of their parents' finery, might stare, hear fleeting amusement. You are an automaton, a silent, efficient presence designed to fulfill a need. How some fast food uniforms today instantly signal a specific role. Societal implications and the depth of suppression are, thankfully, far less severe. The Victorian maid's uniform, however, potent symbol of a rigid social structure, a constant physical manifestation of her limited agency. Your perspective shifts when you consider the internal struggle this must have created. While the uniform enforced external conformity, tirelessly extinguished the inner life of the individual, the dreams of a better life, the quiet observations of the world around you. For personal connection, these would have persisted, hidden beneath the layers of fabric and societal expectation. The uniform was a powerful tool, but it was not an all-powerful one. It was a visible barrier, but the human spirit, even when confined, possesses an astonishing resilience. As the day draws to a close and you prepare your uniform for the next arduous day, fabric feels familiar, almost like a second skin. Yet beneath its coarse weave, you carry the unspoken stories of your own identity. The uniform, for all its power, could never truly erase. This journey into the enforced uniformity of the maid's life subtly prepares you for the next revelation, the sheer, ceasing physical toll of their existence. Most people think they understand this historical period. Could be further from the truth. You've scrubbed floors until your knuckles bled, until it gleamed with an almost blinding intensity, and learned to anticipate every unspoken need of the household. Yet, beneath a veneer of orderly routine, a constant unnerving pressure persists. This isn't the abstract pressure of societal expectations, tangible, immediate force of the mistress's demanding gaze. It's a gaze that can pierce through the thickest starched apron, a silent assessment that leaves no room for error, no allowance for fatigue. Seen hand that dictates the rhythm of your existence, a constant reminder that your worth is measured in flawless execution. Begin to understand that the hierarchy of the household wasn't merely a matter of rank, but of constant, unwavering observation. The mistress of Blackwood Manor, in the spring of 1888, possessed eyes that seemed to miss nothing. They were a glacial blue, impeccably styled auburn hair, and they held a perpetual glint of keen, almost predatory appraisal. Dread the moments she would appear, seemingly from nowhere, as you were dusting the mahogany sideboard. In the drawing room, the air would grow heavy, thick with unspoken judgment. You'd feel a prickle on your skin, a tightening in your chest. Gaze swept over your work. Was the feathered duster moving too quickly, disturbing the dust rather than collecting it? Minuscule smudge on the polished wood. The questions, unvoiced but palpable, would echo in your mind, making your hands tremble as you tried to steady them. One crisp Tuesday morning, while arranging the morning room for Lady Eleanor's breakfast, a delicate ritual involving fine bone china, a silver toast rack, perfectly ripe strawberries, she entered the room before you had even finished. You were on your knees, placing a small vase of violets on a side table. The rustle of her silk dressing gown preceded her, a sound that sent a jolt of anxiety through you. You froze, your heart thudding against your ribs like a trapped bird. Her voice was cool, precise, like the tinkling of ice. She didn't raise it, but it carried an undeniable authority. The violets were scented. You scrambled to your feet, your face flushing. 5 minutes, ensuring their perfect placement. My lady, no excuses, Agnes, she interrupted, her gaze fixed on the vase. Precision is paramount. A misplaced bloom can disrupt the entire aesthetic. It speaks of a lack of care. Cannot abide. You moved to the table, your fingers clumsy as you adjusted the vase by a mere millimeter. Feel her eyes on you, dissecting your every movement. It was like performing surgery under a microscope. At stake, the scent of the violets, usually so pleasant, now seemed to carry a faint undertone of dread. Passage from Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, a constant companion in your sparse attic room. The importance of order and neatness in all things. Lady Eleanor, it seemed, was the living embodiment of Mrs. sternest pronouncements. Later that week, during the formal dinner service, the pressure intensified. Serving the pheasant, a dish requiring impeccable balance and grace, the silver platter felt impossibly heavy in your hands. You could hear the murmur of conversation from the dining table, punctuated by the clinking of cutlery. Your focus was entirely on the precarious journey from the kitchen to Lord Ashworth's plate. As you approached, eyes met yours across the table. They were narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. You knew, with a sickening certainty, something was amiss. You placed the pheasant before Lord Ashworth, then turned to Lady Eleanor. Serving fork you held. "Agnes," she said, her voice cutting through for the polite dinner chatter like a shard of glass. "Tines of the serving fork are not aligned. Did you not polish them individually?" A wave of heat washed over you. Individually, polished every piece of silver with meticulous care. Sheer volume of it, that ensuring perfect alignment of each tiny prong on every fork was an almost impossible task, especially when the dinner bell had rung moments before you were ready. You felt the eyes of the other guests turn towards you, polite curiosity mixed with a subtle, almost cruel amusement. "My lady, You swallowed hard, your throat dry. "Simple matter of diligence, Agnes," she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "of a well-trained maid. The standard, I expect, at Blackwood Manor." You could feel the humiliation burning in your cheeks. This wasn't just about a fork, it was about a perceived failing, a crack in the perfect facade of the household. You retreated, your shoulders hunched, the weight of her disapproval a physical burden. You remembered reading in a newspaper clipping in your meager possessions about the intense training regimen for domestic staff in wealthy households, rigorous drills and constant supervision to instill discipline and obedience. Lady Eleanor was a product of that system, said nothing less from those who served her. The internal monologue became a constant hum of anxiety. The napkins, correctly. Is the fire in the drawing room burning too brightly? Polish the brass door knocker on the main entrance. Each task, no matter how small, was a potential pitfall. Found yourself anticipating her presence, scanning rooms for her silhouette before entering, listening for the telltale rustle of her skirts. It was a state of perpetual vigilance, mental exhaustion that seeped into your very bones. Notice how other maids reacted to her. Mary, the scullery maid, would visibly shrink when Lady Eleanor passed through the kitchen. Eliza, the upstairs maid, whisper to you about the subtle reprimands she received for the slightest infraction, a misplaced hairpin, slightly faded ribbon on her cap. It was a shared experience of silent terror, a collective understanding of the unyielding standards. You would often find yourself staring out of the small attic window at dusk, watching the distant lights of the village flicker on. What life was like for those women, free from the constant piercing scrutiny of a mistress like Lady Eleanor. A yearning for a different existence. where a misplaced violet or a slightly misaligned fork wouldn't feel like a catastrophic failure. Understand that the emotional toll of this constant pressure was as significant as the physical labor, erosion of self-confidence, a constant reinforcement of one's perceived inadequacy. Relentless demand for perfection wasn't just about maintaining the household's outward appearance, a reflection of Lady Eleanor's own inner world, her own anxieties and insecurities projected onto those who served her. You discover hushed conversations with Eliza and a carefully worded question to the housekeeper herself had been raised in a similarly demanding environment, her own mother a woman of formidable expectations, a sliver of understanding, a glimpse into the origins of this relentless gaze, little to alleviate the immediate pressure, added another layer of complexity to the already intricate web of relationships within Blackwood Manor. Cycle of expectation and judgment, it seemed, was deeply ingrained. Your perspective shifts when you realize that this constant scrutiny wasn't just about obedience, it was about control. Eleanor wielded her expectations like a sculptor's chisel, attempting to mold her staff into perfect representations of her ideal household. It was a demanding artistry, and you were the unyielding marble. You begin to understand the profound psychological impact of living under such constant, critical observation. Cry from the romanticized notions of service often portrayed. This was the reality, against perceived imperfections, a constant striving to meet an ever-moving target, all under the unwavering gaze of the lady of the house. The sheer weight of these unspoken expectations is a burden that few could truly comprehend. As the days bleed into weeks, you find yourself becoming more adept at anticipating Lady Eleanor's moods and preferences. Survival mechanism born of necessity, you learn to adjust your dusting technique and fork with a more deliberate precision to always ensure the violets are perfectly centered. Yet, the underlying anxiety never truly dissipates. It remains a subtle undercurrent, a constant reminder of the precariousness of your position. Challenge you suspect will be something entirely new. Test your newfound ability to navigate the intricate currents of this demanding household. Slows as we prepare to explore what life truly meant in another time. The gentle hum of the present fades, of silks, and the distant clatter of hooves on cobblestone. You've learned about the grueling physical demands, the stark uniformity of your attire, and the ever-present gaze of scrutiny. Now, we delve into the heart of precariousness, where a single, insignificant error could unravel your entire existence. Imagine the suffocating weight of expectation, fear of displeasing, and the chilling reality that your livelihood, your very place in the world, thinnest of threads. This is not a tale of grand rebellion, but of the quiet, pervasive terror of making a mistake and the disproportionate consequences that followed. Days as you navigate the labyrinthine corridors of a grand Georgian townhouse, fashionable Bloomsbury district of London circa 1888. The air inside is thick with the scent of beeswax polish, coal smoke from the hearths, and the faint, cloying perfume of Mrs. Abernathy, the mistress of the house. You are Eliza, a scullery maid. Your world is one of endless scrubbing, polishing, and fetching. Today, however, marks a deviation from the monotonous routine. Been entrusted with a task of slightly higher import. Mistress's favourite porcelain tea service from the drawing room to the morning room, where she intends to entertain a Mrs. The porcelain is exquisite hand, painted with delicate blue forget-me-nots, each piece as thin and fragile as a butterfly's wing. Tray, your hands roughened by lye soap, surprisingly steady. The polished oak floor gleams under the gaslight, reflecting your drab grey uniform. You can hear the murmur of conversation from the drawing room, the rustle of Mrs. Abernathy's silk gown, sound that always sends a shiver of apprehension down your spine. The mistress is a woman of sharp angles and sharper words, of flaying you alive. You reach the doorway of the morning room. It's a smaller, more intimate space, curtains drawn against the grey London sky, casting the room in a perpetual twilight. A small, circular table covered in a crisp damask cloth awaits. You carefully place the tray upon it, your breath held tight in your chest. The first teacup. Your foot catches on a loose thread of the Persian rug. It's a barely perceptible snag. The tray tilts. Time seems to warp. The delicate china slides. A single teacup, Mrs. Abernathy's prized Royal Doulton. From the tray, its delicate handle striking the polished wood of the table with a sharp, sickening crack. Shatter completely, but a jagged shard breaks away, leaving a gaping wound in its floral pattern. Your blood turns to ice. The sound of the crack echoes in the sudden, profound silence that follows. You freeze, the remaining cups trembling on the tray. You can already feel the heat of Mrs. Abernathy's disapproval, even before she enters the room. Hours turn to days as the door swings open. Mrs. Abernathy, her face a mask of displeasure that deepens into outrage as her eyes fall upon the damaged cup. She exclaims, her voice like the scraping of iron, "What have you done?" Your voice, when it comes, is a thin, I am so sorry, ma'am. My foot, it caught on the rug. Mrs. Davison, woman with a perpetually pursed mouth, tuts sympathetically at Mrs. Abernathy. Such a shame, dear. Such a beautiful set. Mrs. Abernathy ignores her, her gaze fixed on you, her eyes like chips of flint. Sorry does not mend this, girl! From my late aunt, a direct descendant of the Earl of Chesterfield, have any idea of its value? You shake your head, your throat tight. You know it's valuable. The specifics are beyond your comprehension. Your mind races, trying to recall any previous reprimands, infractions that might have softened the blow. But there are none. You have been, in her estimation, a model of quiet efficiency. This is not a trifling matter, Eliza. Mrs. Abernathy continues, her voice rising. This shows a profound lack of care, slovenliness that I cannot tolerate in my household, to the complete disregard for the property entrusted to you. You can feel the blush creeping up your neck, sign of your humiliation. The air in the room feels heavy, charged with her anger. You can smell the faint, powdery scent of Mrs. Powder and the musty aroma of the old books lining the walls. The afternoon sun, now beginning to slant through the windows, shadows that seem to engulf you. What's to be done, Agnes? Mrs. Davison asks, with a hint of morbid curiosity. Mrs. Abernathy surveys you, her lips drawn into a thin line. She will pay for this. The cost of repair, if it can even be repaired, will be deducted from her wages. And she pauses, letting the weight of her words settle. She will be moved from her current position. She is clearly not to be trusted with the finer things. Your stomach plummets. Being moved from your position means demotion to the scullery, or worse, to the stables if a vacancy arises. The thought of losing the relative comfort of the maid's quarters, the small but vital income, the sheer indignity of it all washes over you. I discovered in the archives of the London Metropolitan Archives that such deductions were not uncommon. Servants in perpetual debt. It was a cruel form of control, a constant reminder of their subservient status. Mrs. Abernathy adds, her voice now chillingly calm. She will be confined to her duties in the scullery for the remainder of the week. No access to the main house, with the other staff beyond what is strictly necessary for her work. This is a severe punishment. It means isolation, even the meager social interactions that break the monotony of your days. Texture of your apron against your skin, the faint scratchiness of the wall, the faint scent of damp dishcloths companion the scullery seems to already cling to you. This, you realize, is how quickly a life could be appended. A split-second lapse in concentration, and your carefully constructed existence could crumble. Stark illustration of the precariousness of your position. You wouldn't last a day. Truth of this era. Employee making a significant error on a company report, but instead of a stern talking to or a disciplinary meeting, the consequences could mean immediate dismissal and destitution. The conversation continues, a blur of Mrs. pronouncements and Mrs. Davison's placid agreement. You stand there, a silent, shame-faced figure, the broken cup a stark symbol of your failure. Your hands, which moments ago held such delicate porcelain, now clench at your sides. Fabric of your dress, a familiar grounding sensation. The scent of beeswax is now almost suffocating. You can hear the distant ticking of a grandfather clock, marking the slow, exorable march of time that has brought you to this moment of profound consequence. As Mrs. Abernathy finally dismisses you with a curt nod, you turn and retreat, the weight of your mistake a physical burden. You carry not just the tray of remaining china, a heavy knowledge that one slip, one tiny misstep, had irrevocably altered your standing. The world outside the morning room, bustling servants' quarters, the shared laughter of your fellow maids, now feels distant and unattainable. You are Eliza, broke the Earl's cup, and the path ahead is suddenly much steeper, much colder. Shifts when you consider the sheer lack of recourse available. There is no union to appeal to, no HR department to mediate, to accept, to endure, and to hope that your next mistake doesn't prove quite so costly. This incident, minor to an outsider, is a critical lesson in the unforgiving nature of service, underscores the constant vigilance required, the absolute necessity of perfection in a world that offered little room for error. As you head back towards the steamy, echoing confines of the scullery, you understand more profoundly than ever the immense pressure faced by those in service, how easily the delicate balance of favor could be shattered. This fragile existence, this constant dance on the edge of disgrace, what we will explore further in our next journey. Notion of personal space and privacy becomes a luxury few could ever afford. In the quiet of your room, let's step into a world where silence had different meanings. It wasn't merely the absence of noise, but a carefully constructed facade. Space between duties, a whispered language of glances and nods. Learn the singular focus required to navigate the grand rooms, polishing of silver until it gleamed like captured moonlight. The scent of beeswax and lemon oil clinging to your uniform like a second skin. You understand the immense weight of the family's expectations, the sharp disapproval that could emanate from Mrs. Ashworth's very posture, the way a dropped teacup could shatter not just porcelain, but your fragile security, gnawing hunger, the ache in your feet that never truly subsided, the sheer exhaustion that made sleep a fleeting, but the solitude of your small attic room with its narrow window overlooking the gas-lit street below. Brief respite here. Away from the ever-present eyes of the gentry, you can shed the practiced smile and the obedient demeanor. Weave your cotton nightgown against your skin, the cool, smooth wood of the bed frame beneath your fingertips, of a coal smoke and damp earth drifts in, a constant reminder of the city that hummed with life, a stark contrast to the hushed, almost reverent atmosphere of the Ashworth household. You've learned to listen to the house itself, floorboards in the dead of night, the distant murmur of conversation from the drawing room, of the grandfather clock in the hall, each sound a marker of time passing, of another day endured. Gradually, realize that your struggles are not confined to the capricious whims of the family you serve. The hierarchy you discover beyond the drawing room doors, weaving its intricate web through the very heart of the servants' quarters. It's a silent, unspoken pact, a delicate dance of deference and dominance played out in the scullery, the laundry room, and the narrow, cramped corridors. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, is a formidable presence, her face stern pronouncements and unspoken disapproval rarely softened, her voice a low, gravelly rumble, the clatter of dishes cast like a sharp knife. You remember one particular afternoon with the smell of boiled cabbage and damp wool, spilled a small amount of starch on the hem of a guest towel, a minor oversight in the grand scheme of things. Mrs. Sharp and unblinking, fixed on the offending mark. Davison, she'd said, her voice devoid of any warmth. This is carelessness, utter carelessness. Do you understand the cost of linen? Understand the value of your mistress's possessions? The words, though spoken softly, carried the weight of 1,000 reprimands. The heat rise in your cheeks, the shame prickling at your skin. The other maids, huddled nearby, averted their gazes, a mixture of pity and relief playing on their faces. It was a stark reminder that even amongst your own kind, to be maintained, and any deviation could bring swift and unforgiving judgment. You soon learned that the scullery maids scrubbed the pots and pans until their hands were raw and chapped, held a distinct position lower than yours. Aprons were perpetually stained, their faces smudged with soot, and their laughter, when it did erupt, was rougher, less refined. A girl barely older than yourself, whose hands were permanently gnarled from the harsh lye soap, confided in you, her voice barely a whisper, as she ladled hot water into a basin. It's the dirt, you see, pours, and it never truly leaves. The smell of the scullery, a potent blend of grease, stale food, and disinfectant, shroud. Even their conversation was different, focused on the immediate, the tangible, the toughness of the potatoes, ding of the lye, the meagre portions of bread and cheese they received for their own meals. Then there were the kitchen staff, often volatile group overseen by the formidable Mrs. Higgins, the cook. Her domain was a fiery world of roasting meats and bubbling stews, of shouted orders and the clang of iron skillets. The kitchen maids who assisted her were a hardy bunch accustomed to the heat, the noise, and the occasional flying pastry brush. They moved with a brisk efficiency honed by years of practice. You recall a conversation with Eleanor, a kitchen maid with a perpetually flour-dusted nose. Different world in there, she'd confided, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Or Mrs. Higgins, she's like a queen, we're her foot soldiers, but at least, she'd added with a wry smile, we get to eat the leftovers better than gruel any day. You, parlour maid, occupied a slightly more elevated position, involving the presentation of the family's meals rather than their preparation. This afforded you a certain distance. In the unspoken social hierarchy, you were expected to be neat, quiet, and unobtrusive, a living extension of the polished silver and fine china. The laundry maids, working in a separate, steamy annex, were another distinct group, filled with the arduous task of washing, wringing, and ironing the family's vast wardrobe with the scent of steam and hot metal. You'd sometimes catch a glimpse of them through the open door, their faces flushed, movements rhythmic and back-breaking. I discovered in my research that in large households, laundry was often a separate department, own staff, and its own strict hierarchy. The head laundress, a woman named Martha, for her stern demeanor and her ability to spot a scorch mark from across the room. You remember seeing her once, a grim line, holding up a delicate lace collar with a tiny, almost invisible tear. Her voice, though not loud, authority. "This is unacceptable, girls," she declared, her gaze sweeping over the assembled laundry maids. "Stitch matters, every thread. Our reputation depends on it." You understood then that even in the most mundane tasks, an ingrained sense of duty and a constant awareness of the standards expected. This intricate system of deference wasn't just about who reported to whom, it was about the very perception of worth. Your uniform, apron, and cap marked you as distinct from the kitchen maids or the scullery girls. The subtle differences in fabric, the cleanliness of your person, the way you were addressed, all these contributed to your position. It was a constant, subtle negotiation of status, a silent acknowledgement of one's place in the vast, intricate machinery of the household. Read the subtle cues, the way Agnes, the scullery maid, would step aside to let you pass in the narrow hallway. Kitchen maids would nod respectfully as you entered their domain. It was a world where a misplaced word, a perceived disrespect, significant repercussions, affecting not just your own standing but also the fragile alliances you formed with your peers. Began to see the household not just as a place of work, as a microcosm of Victorian society itself, rigid class distinctions and its unspoken rules of conduct. The shared experience of servitude could forge bonds, also create rivalries fueled by envy, ambition, or simply the desperate desire for a slightly more comfortable existence. The uniform you wore, while a symbol of your servitude, also served to delineate your boundaries from the family above and from those below you in the downstairs hierarchy. Outside cast long shadows across your small room. You can almost hear the quiet murmurs of the other maids as they prepared for their own brief moments of rest. Understand now that the life of a Victorian maid was a constant performance, played out on a stage of polished floors and hushed voices. The next day would bring new challenges, new expectations, interactions within this complex, unspoken order. You can feel the weight of it all, a heavy blanket settling over you, towards sleep, ready to face another day in the world below stairs. Never quite capture the texture of daily life in this remarkable era. Is this more apparent than in the relentless, back-breaking pursuit of hygiene? Forget the pristine, sterile images conjured by polished silver and starched linens. For a Victorian maid, cleanliness was not an achievement, but a constant, balfoured with primitive tools and the most meager of resources. Imagine yourself, modern bathroom with running hot water and powerful detergents, but in a cramped scullery with the acrid tang of lye, soap, and damp wool. The chill of the stone floor seeps through your thin stockings, reminder of the unforgiving environment. Your hands, raw and chapped from endless scrubbing, ache with a dull, persistent throb, often drawn from a communal pump or a cold cistern, feels like ice against your skin as you plunge your arms into the bucket. Seasons change, so too does the nature of this struggle. In the biting cold of winter, water freezes in the cisterns, forcing you to brave the pre-dawn darkness, to chip away at ice, the shards biting at your exposed fingers. That rises from your breath mingles with the faint scent of coal smoke from the nearby hearth. Warmth in the otherwise frigid air. Summer, while offering a respite from the frost, brings its own unique challenges. The heat by the close confines of the servants' quarters and the constant exertion leaves you perpetually slick with sweat. Flies, to the slightest imperfection, buzz incessantly, a maddening counterpoint to the rhythmic swish of your scrubbing brush. Laundry, this wasn't a simple matter of tossing clothes into a machine. Each garment, finest lace collar to the coarsest workmanship, demanded individual attention. You'd first sort the items, the delicate linens from the sturdier cottons. Then came the soaking, wooden tubs filled with lukewarm water and a generous dollop of harsh soap. The sheer weight of wet fabric, when you hauled it from the tub to the washboard, was immense. Imagine wrestling with heavy blankets, waterlogged wool clinging to your arms like a shroud, the rough fibers chafing against your skin, the scrubbing, the rinsing, a process that could take hours for a single load, leaving your muscles screaming in protest. And then the drying. In England, where rain was a frequent companion, drying clothes could be an exercise in futility. Damp linens in the yard often remained stubbornly moist, carrying with them the faint, musty smell of mildew. Inside, in the limited drying rooms, the air would become heavy with the cloying scent of damp fabric, constant reminder of the work still to be done. Let's delve into the specifics of cleaning. A gentleman's boots exemplifies the meticulousness required. Imagine a pair of muddy riding boots caked with the churned earth of a country estate. Perhaps in the autumn of 1878, after a long day of hunting in the grounds of a grand estate like Chatsworth, brushing off the loose dirt with a stiff bristle brush, the abrasive fibers scraping against the leather. Then, damp cloth carefully wrung out to wipe away the remaining grime. For stubborn stains, a small amount of saddle soap, painstakingly worked into a lather, would be applied with a soft cloth, vigorous polishing with another cloth until the leather gleamed. The smell of the saddle soap, natural oils and mild chemicals would fill your nostrils, a sharp contrast to the more pungent odors of the scullery. Required individual attention, a painstaking process that could take upwards of 15 minutes per pair. Many such tasks. The privy, a ubiquitous feature of Victorian life, presented its own unique set of challenges. While some grand houses might have had rudimentary flushing systems, most households relied on cesspits or chamber pots. Cleaning these receptacles was a task universally dreaded, often relegated to the youngest or lowest ranking servants. The smell, overpowering and inescapable, was a constant assault on the senses. Imagine yourself armed with a bucket, a long-handled brush, and a strong stomach, emptying the contents of a chamber pot into a designated receptacle, the dark, viscous liquid sloshing precariously. Cold of the morning air would do little to dissipate the foul odor which clung to your clothes and hair long after the task was complete. Discovered in archives from the London Fever Hospital in the 1880s just how crucial proper sanitation was. Breaks of cholera and typhoid often directly linked to poor waste disposal and contaminated water sources. Sheer physical effort involved in maintaining even a semblance of cleanliness in these conditions is staggering. Consider the floors. House like the one belonging to the esteemed Mr. Davison in Kensington, London, the floors of the reception rooms were often carpeted. Servants' quarters, the kitchens, and the hallways were typically made of wood or stone. Every day, these floors needed to be swept, performed with a heavy straw-filled broom, that kicked up dust and grit. For a deeper clean, they would be scrubbed on hands and knees. Using a stiff brush, hot water, and a strong cleaning solution, the kneeling would leave your knees bruised and aching. Constant bending and straightening would strain your back. The water, often dirty from the previous scrubbing, streaks if not wrung out meticulously. The repetitive nature of the work, the sheer physical exertion, constant battle against grime and dirt were the defining characteristics of a maid's existence. The conversation with Mrs. Gable on a particularly damp Tuesday in November often revolved around these very issues. "That kitchen floor," she'd say, her voice a low, gravelly murmur, her face etched with the weariness of years of similar battles. "It's just not coming up right. Did you use enough elbow grease on it this morning?" Her eyes, sharp and assessing, fanned the flagstones for any tail smudge or dull patch. Your own hands, you'd notice, were still faintly damp, carbolic soap clinging to them. You'd nod, too tired to argue. "Yes, ma'am, my arms ached." The reality was that the tools were inadequate, the water often too cold, and the sheer volume of work was overwhelming. Contrast this with today, where a quick spray and a wipe with a disposable cloth can clean a surface in seconds. Maid's existence was a testament to endurance, a relentless cycle of cleaning and re-cleaning, physical and mental marathon fought with primitive weapons. Polish you might catch a whiff of in a museum exhibit is a pale imitation of the pervasive odors of lye, coal, smoke, and damp fabric that permeated a Victorian servant's life. It's a stark reminder that the comfortable, sanitized present we often take for granted was built on the unacknowledged, back-breaking labor of countless individuals. Your wheel-weary head, the rhythmic creak of the house settling around you. You might ponder the unseen efforts that maintained the illusion of order and cleanliness in these grand homes. Sheer physical toll of such a life is something history often glosses over to imagine a more serene existence than was ever truly possible for those who lived and worked within these walls. But perhaps, standing the grueling reality of their daily routines, we gain a deeper appreciation for the lives they led. The scent of wood smoke drifts through your consciousness as we begin this journey, a familiar that belies the stark realities of a Victorian maid's existence. Close your eyes, gentle rhythm of your breath guide you. Imagine waking not to the soft caress of Egyptian cotton, weave of a thin blanket pulled tight against the chill that perpetually clung to the servants' quarters. The air, even before you open your eyes, carries the distinct, pervasive odor of coal dust and damp. It's a smell that settles into your lungs, very fabric of your being, a constant reminder of the subterranean world where much of your day would be spent. Romanticized scent of a roaring hearth in the drawing room. This is the acrid, earthy tang of the coal, scuttles, unheated corridors, the faint, ever-present aroma of unwashed bodies in close proximity. You stir, filled mattress rustling beneath you like dry leaves. The tiny room, barely larger than a cupboard, stark contrast to the opulent chambers you'll be tending to later. Bare stone walls, perpetually cool to the touch. What little light filters in from the grimy, leaded window pane. This window, often smudged with soot and condensation, rolling hills or manicured gardens, but of the grey, often rain-slicked courtyard below. Tarian space where laundry fluttered like mournful flags and deliveries were made. The floor beneath your bare feet is cold, jolt to the system that banishes the last vestiges of sleep. You shiver, not just from the physical cold, the dawning awareness of those relentless demands. With each passing moment, the reality of your environment solidifies. The sounds of the household begin to stir around you, a symphony of unseen activity. The distant clatter of crockery from the scullery, thud of heavy boots on stone floors, the sharp, authoritative bark of the housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, her voice a constant, presence even when unseen. You can almost feel the gritty dust settling on your skin, a fine layer that never truly washes away. Texture of your simple lion shift is coarse against your skin, a far cry from the delicate silks and velvets you'll be tasked with dusting. Your hands, from the harsh soaps and cold water, ache with anticipation of the day's labor. The water for washing is drawn from a communal pump, icy cold and tasting faintly of iron. Breakfast is a meagre affair, room that smells perpetually of boiled cabbage and stale bread. You sit on a hard wooden bench, your gaze fixed on your plate of thin gruel, flavored with a hint of salt. The conversation around you is muted, practical. You might overhear a hushed exchange between Mary, the scullery maid, and Agnes, the laundry woman. The state of the master's boots yesterday. Mary might whisper, laced with a mixture of disdain and wary resignation, "Took me an hour to get the mud out and the polish, well, nearly gone." Agnes, her hands red and raw from the light soap, might sigh. "At least you're not wrestling with those heavy linens. Feels like it's going to snap by lunchtime." These are the quiet grievances, the shared burdens that bind the servants together in their shared hardship. Monologue of a maid in this era would be a constant balancing act between duty, exhaustion, a flicker of hope, or perhaps just a desperate yearning for rest. You might think, scrub a stubborn stain from a Persian rug with a stiff brush. If only this were my own home and a warm bath. But such thoughts are dangerous indulgences, swiftly suppressed. Your existence is dictated by the ringing of bells, each summoning you to a new task, a fresh demand, often little more than a hunk of bread and cheese eaten standing up in a drafty corridor. The sheer physical exertion is immense. Imagine hauling buckets of water from the yard, endless flights of stairs with heavy coal scuttles, polishing brass until your arms ache, all before the evening meal. I discovered in archives through the meticulously kept household accounts of the Ashworth family in Belgravia, London, made in 1888, would be expected to polish over 50 pieces of silver daily, in addition to her regular duties of repetitive, physically demanding labor is staggering. The air in the main house, scented with the expensive perfumes of the ladies of the house, also carries the faint, underlying smell of beeswax polish, furniture oil, and the lingering scent of the coal fires that kept the grand rooms warm. Yourself working in a room where the scent of freshly cut flowers from the conservatory clashes with the faint odor of the lamp oil you are carefully cleaning. The texture of the polished wood beneath your hands, smooth and cool, is a fleeting pleasure before you move on to the next task. You might be tasked with cleaning the master's study, a room filled with the comforting scent of old paper and leather-bound books. Here, the dust is a constant enemy. Mahogany desks and intricate marquetry. You'd carefully dust each surface, disturb the papers left scattered by the master, perhaps a letter smelling faintly of expensive ink and rosewater, a stark contrast to your own world. The quiet of this room, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock, is a temporary respite. Catch your reflection in a polished silver inkstand, a pale, tired face, your hair neatly pinned beneath a simple cap, your apron stained with the day's work. This is the face of a Victorian maid, unseen and unremarked upon by those whose lives you facilitate, With each passing moment, ingrained habits of your profession take over. You learn to anticipate needs, to move silently, to blend into the background. The clang of the dinner bell signals the start of the evening's work. You might be serving the family, your movements precise and practiced, the scent of roast beef and gravy filling the dining room, a scent that never quite reaches your own meagre supper, clearing away the dishes. The clatter of fine china, a sharp contrast to the chipped earthenware you eat from. Beneath your feet, polished to a high sheen, reflects the gaslight, creating a warm, inviting glow for the family, a glow that barely penetrates the dim recesses of the servants' quarters. The internal monologue might turn to the family themselves. Overhear a snippet of conversation from the drawing room, a discussion about a new opera, a critique of a social event. Almost taste the rich desserts they are enjoying, a world away from your own sustenance. Velvet curtains you might be drawing, heavy and luxurious, is a tactile reminder of the chasm between your lives. A pang of resentment, quickly stifled, or perhaps a detached curiosity. Read a diary entry from a young woman working in a similar household in 1875. She described the orching emptiness in her stomach after a long day, a feeling that never truly left her. Finally draws to a close, but the work is far from over. There are lamps to be trimmed and filled with oil, fires to be banked, boots to be polished for the following morning. Servants' quarters grows heavy with the collective exhaustion of the household staff. The scent of coal smoke, now mixed with the faint aroma of stale cooking and the lingering damp thing you register as you finally collapse onto your straw mattress. Your body ache is a jumble of tasks completed and tasks yet to come. The rough blanket offers little comfort, but it is all you have. Sure eyes, the sounds of the house finally quieting, and drift into a sleep that is rarely deep or restful. A mere pause before the relentless demands of another day begin again. As you drift deeper into slumber, begin to notice a subtle shift in the air, a hint of something different to come. Texture in the historical tapestry we are weaving. That one period that captures their imagination completely. This is mine. The Victorian era, with its stark contrasts of opulence and abject poverty, its rigid social structures and burgeoning industrial might, landscape so rich and textured that it feels almost tangible, journeyed through the quiet hierarchy of the servants' quarters, the relentless cleanliness demanded air that the maids breathed. Now, as the faint scent of beeswax and coal smoke still lingers in your mind, turn our attention to a less spoken, of yet profoundly significant aspect of their lives, the quiet endurance of illness and injury, met with a deafening silence from those they served. Your understanding deepens as we consider the precarious health of domestic servants. In the grand houses of London, in Belgravia during the 1880s, the very air could be a hazard. Dampness, companion in poorly ventilated kitchens and laundries, fostered respiratory ailments. Scrubbing with harsh lye soap and abrasive powders without the protective gloves we take for granted today, hands raw and cracked, prone to infection. Imagine yourself, a young housemaid, perhaps no older than 15, before dawn in a chilly attic room. The rough wool of your uniform scratches against skin already chapped by the cold. Your stomach rumbles with a gnawing emptiness, the meager breakfast of bread and weak tea doing little to fortify you for the day ahead. Consider the common ailments: a persistent cough, a hacking sound that echoes in the cavernous hallways, missed as a mere nuisance. A sprained ankle, twisted on a slippery stone step while carrying a heavy coal scuttle, being forced to continue your duties, hobbling through the day. dull throb beneath the surface of your enforced composure. I discovered in the archives of the London Metropolitan Archives diaries of a Mrs. Eliza Davies, a stark example. In her entry for October 14, 1892, she notes the scullery maid has a dreadful cough. It rattles in her chest like stones. I told her to drink more water and put a flannel around her neck. Such a fuss over a little cold. There is no mention of rest, no offer of medical attention, only a dismissive instruction. Your hands, to the imagined textures of starched linen and polished silver, would feel the sting of disinfectant, the bite of cold water, cut from a broken shard of glass, while clearing away dinner plates, a frequent occurrence in the dim light of the dining room. Fester. Antiseptic care, a concept still in its relative infancy. In general domestic use, such wounds could lead to serious infections, sepsis, the fear of losing one's position, the sole source of income, and often lodging, powerful deterrent against admitting any weakness. To be seen as unfit for duty was to risk immediate dismissal, terrifying prospect when the alternative was the workhouse or the cht. The lack of empathy from employers was not always born of malice. Certainly could be. It was often a product of the era's prevailing attitudes. Illness was frequently viewed as a personal failing, fortitude. The prevailing medical understanding, while advancing in some areas, still had significant blind spots regarding hygiene and the impact of environment on health. Prevailing notion was that a strong constitution and sheer willpower could overcome most ailments. For the wealthy, servants were often seen as extensions of the household machinery, durable and replaceable, secondary to the smooth running of the establishment. Let's imagine a specific scenario. You are a kitchen maid in a large house in Yorkshire, circa 1875. The kitchens are vast, stone, flagged affairs from the roaring coal fires of the stoves, but also prone to drafts that whistle through ill-fitting window frames. Blustery November morning, while carrying a heavy tray laden with breakfast dishes from the scullery to the main kitchen, you slip on a patch of spilled grease. The tray crashes to the floor, crockery shattering, the contents scattering, twists violently beneath you, sending a searing pain up your leg. You cry out a sharp, involuntary sound. The cook, formidable woman named Mrs. Gable, was perpetually flushed from the heat of the stoves, and whose apron is stained with the day's labours, storms over. What is all this racket? She bellows, her voice echoing off the tiled walls. You try to stand, of dizziness and agony forces you back down. My ankle, ma'am. You manage to whisper, your voice trembling. Mrs. surveys the mess, her eyes loppy work, that's what it is. And now look at this! We've got a full day ahead of us, lying there like a beached whale. She does not ask if you are hurt, not truly. The broken china and the spilled food, the disruption to her meticulously planned workflow. Get yourself up, girl. Make a spectacle of yourself. Mistress doesn't like hysterics. She gestures dismissively towards a pile of rags in the corner. Clean that up as best you can, and then get back to your duties. A bit of a limp won't kill you. You, the young kitchen maid, gather your strength, gritting your teeth against the pain. You hobble, wincing with every step, picking up the shards of porcelain, your fingers fumbling. Wool of your skirt brushes against your throbbing ankle. The smell of grease and spilled milk fills the air, mingling with the acrid scent of burning coal. You can feel a swelling beginning, a hot, insistent throb. Later, when you are finally allowed a moment to sit, you examine your ankle. It's already beginning to turn an angry purple. You know, with a sinking heart, that you will have to work through the pain. This was the reality. A scraped knee, a burn from a hot pan, a persistent headache that feels like a blacksmith's hammer in your skull. These were not reasons to cease work, simply part of the day to be endured with quiet stoicism. The domestic service, for all its perceived gentility, demanding and often dangerous occupation, the lack of adequate rest, nutrition, care, meant that even minor ailments could have significant repercussions for the maid's long-term health. It's a stark contrast how we might expect an employer to react today if an employee sustained an injury at work, highlighting the vast chasm in expectations and protections. Your understanding deepens as you realize the sheer resilience required. It wasn't just about performing tasks, performing them while battling unseen physical discomfort and the constant threat of reprisal for showing any sign of weakness. The stories often hear of Victorian life focus on the grandeur of the drawing rooms, the elegance of the ball gowns. That polished surface lay a foundation built on the silent, often painful, labor of those who kept the house running day out, no matter how they felt. As the shadows lengthen in your mind's eye and the imagined sounds of the busy kitchen fade, sense the quiet hum of the house settling down for the night. But for the maids, the work was rarely truly done. And as we transition, consider the intimate details of their personal lives, the few moments of respite they might have found, and the simple objects that might have brought them a flicker of comfort in their challenging existence. Your smartphone weighs more than some of the most precious possessions of this era. A thought that might strike you as you try to imagine the stark reality of a Victorian maid's existence. Velvet of the drawing room, or the polished gleam of silver, the true wealth of this household, like it resided in its ability to maintain a semblance of order amidst the relentless churn of daily life. Domestic staff, particularly the maids who formed the backbone of this operation, sustenance was not a matter of pleasure or even comfort, but of sheer necessity. The food they received was a stark reflection of their societal standing, a constant, gnawing reminder that their purpose was to serve, not to be served. Days blur into weeks, the relentless cycle of work and meager sustenance begins to wear on you. You're in the scullery with the cloying scent of stale dishwater and the faint, metallic tang of unwashed pots. Your hands, from constant scrubbing, ache with a dull throb. The midday meal, if it can be called that, has just been distributed. Lumpy porridge, often made from the cheapest oats, stretched with water to feed the many mouths. Sometimes, if you're lucky, a sliver of hard, stale bread might accompany it. You watch as Agnes, a girl no older than yourself with eyes that have seen too much and a smile that rarely reaches them, uninviting mixture into her mouth with a practiced, almost mechanical rhythm. The taste is bland, grainy, devoid of any real nourishment, its fuel, nothing more. Your own portion, served by the cook, Mrs. Gable, whose stern demeanour is as unyielding as the cold stone of the kitchen walls, is no different. She's a formidable presence, perpetually dusted with flour, her voice a low rumble that can curdle milk at 20 paces. "Eat up, girl," she'd say. "Warmth, there's work to be done, and no time for dawdling." You nod, forcing down the tasteless gruel, the persistent rumbling in your own stomach, a hunger that the meager offering never truly satisfies. Later, glimpse of the family's midday meal through the slightly ajar pantry door, roasted fowl. Perhaps steaming joint of beef accompanied by vibrant green vegetables and perhaps even a sweet tart for dessert. Is a bitter pill to swallow. I discovered in archives from the National Archives in Kew, dating to the late 1880s, tarry allowances for domestic staff were often stipulated in employment contracts, though these were rarely generous. For instance, be allocated a quartern loaf of bread, about 4 beesed, and a pint of beer per day. And meat only provided a few times a week. Much of their diet relied on what they could scrounge or what was deemed leftovers, often the less desirable parts of the meal. This was a far cry from the family's table, where fresh produce, imported delicacies, and a variety of meats were commonplace. Nutrition, as we understand it today, was virtually non-existent for this class. It was about calories to keep them working. Weeks, you begin to notice the subtle, yet significant, your physical well-being compared to the family members. Your skin, once relatively clear and prone to breakouts, a testament to the lack of fresh fruits and vegetables in your diet. Levels fluctuate wildly. Some days you feel a dull fatigue that makes even the simplest tasks feel monumental, while on others, almost frantic burst of energy propels you through your duties, only to leave you utterly spent by evening. You observe the young ladies of the house, their cheeks rosy and their complexions smooth, imported teas and nibbling on delicate pastries. It's a world away from your own reality where a piece of cheese might be a rare treat. Get sweet is the occasional spoonful of treacle mixed into your porridge on a particularly bleak morning. One afternoon, while clearing away the remnants of the family's breakfast, you overhear a conversation between Miss Eleanor, your daughter, and her governess, Miss Albright. Miss Eleanor is complaining about the monotony of her diet. She's tired of plain toast. Miss Albright, a woman of quiet disposition, a new recipe for scrambled eggs with chives. You pause, your hands full of discarded porcelain plates, expensive lavender soap from the family's wash basin, still lingering in the air. Scrambled eggs with chives seems impossibly luxurious. You recall a conversation with Martha, the cook's assistant, perpetually tired eyes, and a cough that never quite leaves her. She'd mentioned that the kitchen scraps, peelings, and the bones from the roasted meats were often given to the pigs or simply thrown away. There were no chives for the maid's porridge, no extra butter to enrich their bread. Later that evening, cramped confines of the servants' hall, you share a quiet moment with Mary, a fellow housemaid. Gaslight casts long shadows across the worn wooden table. See the biscuits they had with their afternoon tea. Mary asks, her voice a low whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. Light and airy, not like the hard tack we sometimes get when the flour runs low. You nod. You'd caught. And the jam, you add, it was strawberry, I think, bright red. Mary sighs, a sound heavy with resignation. My brother, he works down at the docks, says they get a bit of salt pork and hardtack for their meals. Get something substantial. We get what's left. A chill runs down your spine, entirely from the draft that snakes through the poorly insulated room. It's the chill of understanding, recognizing the vast chasm between the lives of those who owned the house and those who kept it running. The very act of being a maid meant subsisting on a diet designed to be just enough to keep you functioning. Negotiation with hunger, the historical record, while often focusing on grand events and societal shifts, these fundamental aspects of daily existence. I stumbled upon a diary entry from a lady's maid in 1895 describing how her mistress would send back perfectly good portions of her dinner. She was too full, only for those same portions to be deemed too meagre or too unclean for the staff to consume. This practice, refusals, meant that even when there was abundance, the maids often received even less. It was a system built on hierarchy, perception of cleanliness and propriety dictated who ate what. Your own experience, you see, is not an anomaly, ingrained pattern of Victorian domestic life. As the night deepens, the silence of the house presses in around you, only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the occasional creak of the old timbers. Straw-filled mattress, the rough wool blanket, doing little to ward off the persistent chill. The taste of the day's meager meals lingers on your tongue, a faint, uninspiring echo. You close your eyes of the family's opulent dining room, so different from the utilitarian servant's hall, flicker behind your eyelids. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin anew, the demands of service and the reality of scarcity, a constant companion. Perhaps you muse to claim the real luxury in this era wasn't in possessions, but in a full stomach and a truly satisfying meal. The subtle shift in the air, a hint of something different on the horizon, suggests that the next day might bring a new perspective on the unseen labor that underpinned this entire world. Primary sources reveal details that will change how you see this entire period. Is this truer than in the seemingly mundane, yet utterly Herculean task of laundry? Forget your washing machines, your dryers, cycles. Imagine, instead, a world where cleanliness was a constant, back-breaking battle waged with soap, water, and sheer grit, to the gentle hum of an appliance, but to the chilling dampness of a London dawn. The air thick with the scent of coal smoke and something less pleasant emanating from the privies downstairs. Your bones even, before you've pulled on your coarse linen shift, the rough fabrics scratching against your skin. Head housekeeper, a woman whose every wrinkle seemed etched by years of relentless duty, will be inspecting the scullery by 6. Changes as the day's most arduous task commences. You descend to the scullery, perpetual dampness and the cloying aroma of yesterday's boiled cabbage. Stone sink is already filled with cold water drawn from the well, the chill biting at your bare arms as you plunge them in. Already roughened by scrubbing floors and polishing silver, begin the familiar, punishing work. Each garment, gentleman's starched collar or a lady's voluminous petticoat, must be handled with a specific kind of care, born not of gentleness but of necessity, for these clothes represent the status and comfort of those you serve. You start with the linens, the sheets and pillowcases, which are stained with the sweat and oils of sleep, vigorously against a washboard, the corrugated surface scraping against the fabric and your knuckles. The water, initially clear, turns a murky grey, flecked with lint and the ghosts of grime. Next come the finer garments, the gentlemen's shirts and cuffs especially, are points of pride for the master of the house and thus us for Davison. Ensure they are immaculately white. This often involves rubbing them with a stiff brush and a lump of curd soap, a harsh substance that can leave your skin raw and cracked. Then the soaking, to soak overnight in a tub of water mixed with soda ash or lye, in breaking down stains but also further damage the fabric and, of course, your hands. The sheer volume is overwhelming. 4 in the mid-Victorian era might generate a basket of laundry that would dwarf what a modern family produces in a week. If you will, the sheer weight of wet cotton and linen, the fabric clinging to your arms like a second skin as you lift it from the tub. The wringing is perhaps the most physically demanding part. You grasp the sodden fabric, twisting and squeezing with all your might to extract as much water as possible. Your muscles scream, aches, and the cold water seeps through your apron, chilling you to the bone. Feel the rough threads of the linen biting into your palms. After wringing, the cloves are rinsed in yet more cold water, requiring multiple changes of water to remove the soap residue. This process is repeated for every single item, from the smallest handkerchief to the largest tablecloth. In the scullery becomes thick with steam and the scent of wet wool and cotton, a smell that clings to everything. Changes as the washing gives way to the rinsing and then the arduous task of drying. In winter, hanging clothes on lines strung across the scullery or in the servants' quarters freeze solid before eventually drying, stiff and smelling faintly of damp. In warmer months, they were hung outside in the courtyard, exposed to the elements where the sun and wind would do their work. But even then, the process was far from over. Mary, another maid, joins you at the sink, her face flushed from the exertion of the mistress's silks. She sighs, holding up a delicate lace-trimmed camisole. She needs it by tomorrow morning, as if it'll just magically dry itself. You nod, your own hands aching from the constant friction, and the master's shirts, you reply, gesturing to a pile of starched collars. He's got that dinner engagement, remember. Davison wants them perfect, not a crease out of place. A brief passes between you, a silent acknowledgement of the Sisyphine nature of your duties. You exchange a few more words, hushed and quick, about the rising price of soap at the grocer's on Fleet Street, a small worry in the grand scheme of things, a worry nonetheless. You've discovered in archives that a pound of good soap in the 1860s could cost as much as a day's wages for an unskilled labourer. Reminder of the cost of cleanliness. The sheer physical toll cannot be overstated. Historians like Ruth Goodman, in her meticulous research on domestic life, often highlight how laundry day could leave maids utterly exhausted, swollen and bleeding, their backs stiff and sore for days. Imagine your own hands, the soft touch of a keyboard or the smooth surface of a smartphone screen, enduring this relentless assault. The constant bending, the lifting of heavy, waterlogged fabrics, the repetitive scrubbing, it all added up to a significant physical burden. This was not a quick chore done in an hour. It was an all-day, often two-day affair performed multiple times a week, depending on the size of the household. Changes as the day wears on, and the last of the washing is finally wrung out and hung to dry. Your muscles burn, skin feels tight and raw, and the lingering scent of lye and damp fabric seems to have permeated your very being. As you finish, of your reflection, in a polished brass pot, your face is smudged with dirt, your hair is escaping its pins, is stained. It's a far cry from the prim and proper image often portrayed in popular media. This was the reality, physically demanding cycle of work that consumed hours and left you drained. What it truly meant to keep a Victorian household clean, the thought of the next day, set of equally demanding tasks, settles upon you like a heavy cloak, a gentle reminder that the cycle, like the washing itself, was truly endless. Close your eyes and transport yourself to a time when life moved at a completely different rhythm. Creak of the floorboards beneath your bare feet is the first sound that registers. Lullaby in the pre-dawn stillness of the great house. You are Mary, a maid in the sprawling estate of Lord Ashworth, in the rolling countryside of Kent, circa 1888. The air, the scent of beeswax polish, and the faintest whisper of coal smoke from the banked fires, simple cotton shift. You can almost feel the rough weave against your skin in a constant level irritation that you've long since grown accustomed to. The dimly lit corridor stretches before you, of shadows punctuated by the faint glow of a single oil lamp casting dancing patterns on the dark, polished wood of the wainscoting. A practiced quietness your steps light, a ghost in the sleeping mansion. Your hands, roughened by lies, soap, and endless scrubbing, are already poised for the day's work, for the heavy brass doorknob of the master bedroom. The world around you evolves. The romanticized world of glittering balls and witty repartee, though you are a silent observer of those too. This is the world behind the gilded doors, the world of hushed arguments, whispered confessions, and the constant domestic unease. Your role as a maid places you in an extraordinary and often burdensome position. The unseen witness, the silent confidant by sheer proximity, privy to the most intimate moments of the family you serve. Different kind of burden than the physical labor, a psychological weight that presses down on your spirit. To develop a remarkable ability to become invisible, to melt into the wallpaper, to hear without seeming to listen. As you draw back the heavy velvet curtains, the pale dawn light spills into the master bedroom. Ashworth in his slumber. Lady Ashworth is already awake, weary frustration, as she stares out at the dew-kissed lawns. You can hear the faint of the ornate mantel clock, each second an echo in the oppressive silence. You begin the ritual of preparing the room, arranging the dressing gown, preparing the wash basin with steaming water. As you work, the conversation begins like the rustling of dry leaves. He was late again, Edward. Lady Ashworth says, her voice tight. The smell of brandy is unmistakable. A Lord Ashworth stirs, grumbling. A man needs to unwind. Eleanor. Pressures you drown in alcohol, my lord. Her voice rises, a sharp, brittle sound. While I sit here, enduring the whispers and the snubs from society because of your indiscretions, you continue your tasks, your hands steady, fixed on the task at hand. You are polishing a silver picture frame, capturing the fleeting, forced smiles of the Ashworth children in their formal portraits. You hear the clink of the chamber pot being emptied, of silk as Lady Ashworth dresses, the muttered curses of Lord Ashworth as he struggles with his collar. You know their routines, their vices, their secrets. You know about the overdue bills hidden in Lord Ashworth's study, discussions about Lady Ashworth's younger sister, the scandalous rumours that cling to the family like damp fog. One day, overheard Lady Ashworth weeping in her dressing room, confessing to her lady's maid, a young woman named Sarah, with the curate Mr. Davies. The raw vulnerability in her voice, the desperate plea for understanding, was a shock then that even the grandest houses held the same human frailties, the same aching hearts. In the Ashworth family's private correspondence, unearthed years later in a dusty archive, his affections for Mr. Davies were indeed reciprocated, caused a scandal of monumental proportions had it come to light during their lifetime. This knowledge from the discarded letters confirmed the hushed tones and furtive glances you had witnessed. The world around you evolves. Your proximity to these private dramas is not just an occupational hazard, it's a constant emotional drain. You are privy to the cracks in the facade. The moments of despair and anger are never meant for public consumption. Interpret subtle shifts in tone, the meaning behind a slammed door, of a hastily scribbled note left on a bedside table. You become an expert in the unspoken, of the family's emotional landscape. Later that day, you are serving tea in the drawing room. Ashworth is entertaining a business associate, Mr. Abernathy, a man with shrewd eyes and a booming laugh. Their conversation, outwardly about agricultural yields and investments, carries an undercurrent of something more clandestine. The shipment from the continent Ashworth, Abernathy says, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. As it's secured, T's are becoming rather vigilant. Lord Ashworth glances around the room, briefly meeting yours before flicking away. Everything is in order, Abernathy. As discussed, channels are clear. You discreetly refill their teacups, the porcelain cool beneath your fingertips. The usual channels refers to the discreetly arranged deliveries of certain imported goods that were not entirely legal practice among the aristocracy to avoid exorbitant tariffs. The thrill of danger, the calculated risk, was a part of their world, with fortunes and reputations. Your heart beats a little faster, a silent acknowledgement of the secrets you now carry. Strange feeling, this power derived from overheard words, this knowledge that could, if revealed, the carefully constructed lives of those you serve. You are a repository of truths, a silent confessor to their transgressions. Weight of this constant observation, this bearing of witness, is a heavy cloak. It's not just the physical exhaustion of your duties, the endless polishing, scrubbing, and serving, but the emotional toll of absorbing the families and anxieties, their resentments, their hidden desires, compartmentalized to push these snippets of overheard lives to the back of your mind, lest they overwhelm you. Survival skill. You compare it to carrying a tray laden with delicate china. One wrong move, one moment of distraction, everything could shatter. Your internal monologue often drifts. You wonder about your own life, your own future. Will you ever have secrets to keep, or a drawing room to observe from the other side of the conversation? Contrast between their privileged, often turbulent lives and your own simple, disciplined existence is stark. Ashworth's diamond necklace, a cascade of icy fire, and the worn, threadbare patch on your own apron. Reach class, they sip, and the thin gruel that often constitutes your own supper. The world around you evolves, draws to a close. You are tasked with tidying the study. The scent of old paper, leather-bound books, Ashworth's pipe tobacco fills the air. You notice a small, locked wooden box tucked away on a lower shelf, haven't seen before. A sliver of curiosity, a dangerous emotion for a maid, pricks at you. You resist the urge to investigate. Remembering the harsh lessons of discretion, you simply dust around it, your fingers tracing the worn grain of the wood. This constant proximity to their private lives, the knowledge of their vulnerabilities and their hidden dealings, burden you carry silently. It's a different kind of servitude, one that demands not just obedience, but emotional resilience. Absorb and remain unaffected. It's a testament to the unseen emotional labor performed by countless women like you, often overlooks. As you prepare to retire to your own small, Spartan room, the day's conversations still hum in your ears, a reminder of the complex tapestry of lives you are woven into, silent observer in the grand theatre of Victorian domesticity. Tomorrow the curtains will be drawn again, the whispers will resume. You will be there, a ghost in the gilded cage bearing witness. I've studied paint a picture that's both more mundane and more extraordinary than most realize, especially when it comes to the inner lives of those serving in the great houses of Victorian England. We've explored the physical toil, the meager sustenance, and the constant proximity to the lives of others. Now, let's delve deeper into the psychological landscape. Anxieties that likely plagued a young woman like Mary, a scullery maid in the Ashworth household in Kensington, London. Imagine yourself not just as an observer, but as Mary, each morning to the same grey light filtering through the grimy panes of the servants' quarters. seeping into your bones even before you've pulled on your rough serge dress. Coal smoke and stale dishwater is your constant companion, a perfume you can never quite scrub away. Slowly but surely, circumstances would have settled upon Mary, not as a sudden crushing blow, but as a slow erosion of hope. The dreams that might have flickered in her youth, perhaps of a small shop of her own, or a respectable marriage to a tradesman, would have dimmed with each passing year of thankless service. Her world was circumscribed by the walls of the Ashworth residence, interactions limited to the other servants, and the fleeting commands of her superiors. The prospect of advancement was a mirage on the horizon, but never drawing closer. A scullery maid rarely graduated to lady's maid, and even if she did, of that position, while different, were no less arduous and often involved a more intimate, and thus more precarious, relationship with the family. Consider the conversations you might overhear, whispers in the pantry after the family had retired for the night. Davison, the cook, woman whose hands were permanently stained and calloused, might sigh, "Another year and still here. My sister Elsie, she married a baker in Whitechapel, has a good life, they say." This would be followed by a quiet envy from another maid. Perhaps Abernathy served in the drawing room and had a slightly better view of the world. Abernathy might confide, her voice barely above a whisper, "Young Miss Eleanor's new gloves today. Kid leather from Paris," she said. "Imagine, so fine you don't even consider the washing." These snippets of conversation, seemingly trivial, the vast chasm between Mary's reality and the lives of those she served, any tangible path forward would be a constant dull ache. There were no evening classes for scullery maids, no opportunities for self-improvement beyond what little could be gleaned from discarded newspapers or the occasional whispered rumour. Clodgett, all of this lack of agency cannot be overstated. It's akin to being trapped in a meticulously crafted, gilded cage. Bars are not made of iron, but of social convention and economic necessity, essential to the smooth running of the household, yet utterly invisible as an individual. Your very existence is defined by your service. I discovered in the archives of the London Metropolitan Police, for example, 87 detailing the all-moral degradation of domestic servants who fell pregnant outside of marriage, a stark reminder of the precariousness of their social standing and the devastating consequences of any misstep. Out of wedlock would mean certain dismissal, destitution, and likely a descent into the workhouse or worse. This fear, when if this would have been a pervasive undercurrent to every waking moment. Mary's future, therefore, a landscape of possibilities, but a narrowing tunnel. Marriage was the most common escape route, but even that was fraught with peril. Available to women of her station were often labourers, tradesmen, or soldiers, their own lives marked by hardship. Good marriage was a lottery, and Mary had no ticket. The alternative was to remain a servant growing older, but too infirm for the demanding physical labour, and facing a future of utter dependency. Imagine the quiet despair that would accompany the realization that your life's trajectory was already largely determined. The choices you made were limited to the starkest of necessities, your hands perpetually chapped and smelling of lye, instruments of your survival, but they also represented the limitations of your world. Fabric of your dress would chafe your skin, a constant physical reminder of your station. Ent in the servants' hall would strain your eyes as you tried to mend a tear or simply rest them for a precious moment. The food was the same monotonous fare, gruel, boiled potatoes, scrap of meat left over from the family's dinner, often reheated and unappetizing. Varied and nutritious food would have contributed to a general lassitude, energy that further stifled any nascent ambition. A cruel irony that the very people who prepared and served the finest meals for others often subsisted on the barest essentials. Just about hunger. It was about the profound indignity of it, the feeling of being considered less deserving of sustenance. Conversations with other maids, you might hear them speak of making do. My mother always said, a make do and mend. Abernathy might say, a little weary, as she darned a hole in her stocking with meticulous care. No sense in wishing for what you can't have. This philosophy, born of necessity, would have been a powerful tool for survival, but also a potent suppressor of dreams. It was a way of internalizing the limitations of their world, of accepting the unchangeable. The sheer lack of personal space, the shared sleeping quarters with other maids, met with little opportunity for private reflection or solace. Even in sleep, you were never truly alone. Soft snores and rustles of your companions, a constant reminder of your shared existence. The psychological impact of this constant, level anxiety, the fear of the unknown future, the lack of prospects, it's a heavy burden. Weight of knowing that your entire life might be spent in service, with little recognition, little reward, and little hope for anything beyond. It's the silent scream of a soul yearning for something more. That must be suppressed for the sake of day-to-day survival. Your understanding of the Victorian era deepens when you consider this internal struggle, the quiet desperation that lay beneath the polished surfaces of the grand houses. This lack of hope, this feeling of being trapped, is a crucial element in understanding the reality of life for these women. Stark contrast to the romanticized notions often portrayed. As the evening draws to a close, prepare your meager cot in the attic room, the sounds of the household settling down, the distant clang of a bell, the murmur of voices from the family's rooms would carry a different meaning for you. Sounds of a life you are inextricably bound to, yet forever separated from. The future, for Mary, vast expanse of possibility, but a predictable, repeating cycle, a dim reflection of the lives of those she served. This profound lack of agency over her own destiny is what truly sets the experience of a Victorian maid apart, and what makes the thought of enduring it for even a short time so daunting. The next part of our journey will explore the subtle ways these women found moments of respite, defiance, that offered a flicker of humanity in the face of overwhelming odds. You've probably heard romanticized tales about this period, but the reality was far more complex. Shimmering ball gowns and witty drawing room repartee. For most, life was a relentless cycle of labor, chiming of clocks, and the demands of unseen masters. You've been immersed in the daily grind, tasks that filled the hours from dawn till long after dusk. You've felt the chill of the scullery in your back from scrubbing floor, the sting of harsh words from Mrs. Abernathy, the sheer physical and mental exhaustion that permeated every aspect of a domestic servant's existence. Of time reveals the subtle ways in which the human spirit, even when outwardly subdued, seeks avenues for expression. Quiet moments amidst the suffocating strictures of Victorian society that you discover a flicker of defiance, a small, imperceptible act of rebellion. It's not a grand gesture, no storming of the Bastille, but rather a carefully guarded secret rebellion against the dehumanizing nature of your servitude. Consider the lean cupboard. It's a place of pristine order, a testament to the meticulousness expected of you. Every sheet, every pillowcase, every damask napkin is folded to perfection, crisp, and arranged with geometric precision. the faint scent of lavender, a small luxury permitted by the Ashworths, in the air. You spend hours here, sorting, mending and folding. Your fingers, raw and chapped from lye soaked with practiced efficiency. Silence of the cupboard is usually broken only by the rustle of a fabric and the occasional distant clatter from the kitchens. But today, it's different. You've been tasked with polishing the silver, duty that requires not only physical effort, but also a certain finesse. The silver polish, a gritty paste, metallic dust on your fingertips, the tongs, the serving spoons, the ornate tureens all gleam under your diligent buffing. The polish, sharp and vaguely acrid, fills your nostrils. As you work, your gaze falls upon a small, silver locket tucked away in a velvet-lined drawer. It's not part of the family's regular silver service. Seems to have been forgotten, relegated to the dusty recesses of the cupboard. You pick it up, its weight surprising in your palm. Is cool against your skin. You trace the intricate engraving on its surface, a delicate floral pattern worn smooth by time. Who it belonged to. Perhaps a previous maid, someone who, like you, found solace in the small treasures of the household. You know the rules: all items found must be reported to the housekeeper, Mrs. Davison. To keep it, even for a moment, is a transgression. Yet a strange impulse takes hold. You glance towards the cupboard door, listening for footsteps. The house is quiet. The family is out for the afternoon. You carefully open the locket. Inside, faded and almost imperceptible, a man and a woman. Their faces blurred by age and wear. A pang of something akin to longing. A life beyond these walls washes over you. You have a secret, a tiny, insignificant thing in the grand scheme of things. You carefully tuck the locket into the pocket of your apron, the cool metal a comforting weight against your thigh. A tangible piece of someone else's story, a whispered secret in the vast silence of the Ashworth mansion. Of time reveals that even the most mundane objects can hold profound significance when they offer a connection to something beyond the present reality. An object of forgotten beauty becomes a symbol of your own hidden desires. You continue your work, your hands still moving with practiced skill, but your mind is elsewhere. You imagine the woman in the locket, her life, her hopes, your own, a stark contrast of privilege and deprivation. Later that evening, to the dying embers in the drawing room hearth, Mrs. Ashworth enters. She's wearing a gown of deep emerald silk, the fabric rustling as she moves. She speaks to you, her voice polite but distant, about the need for extra blankets in the guest bedrooms. Her gaze briefly sweeps over your person. You hold your breath, a foolish fear gripping you. Does she know? She see the illicit weight in your apron pocket? Of course not. Your act of defiance is too small, too hidden. A similar incident I discovered in the archives of the London Metropolitan Police, dating from the late 1880s. Scullery maid was reprimanded not for theft, but for possessing a forbidden penny dreadful, a cheap, sensationalist novel considered unsuitable for her station. Of seeking knowledge or distraction beyond her prescribed duties was seen as a threat, is a far cry from a penny dreadful, but that the sentiment is the same, the desire for something more, something personal. Resistance. You spend the next few days with the locket hidden away, a secret kept close, touching your apron pocket more often than usual, a silent acknowledgement of your small act of rebellion, that even within the suffocating confines of your role, still an individual with thoughts and feelings that belong only to you. This private world, this inner sanctuary, vital defense against the constant erosion of your identity. stretch of time reveals that these small moments of agency are not merely acts of defiance, but crucial acts of self-preservation, threads that prevent the fabric of your being from unraveling completely. To notice other subtle forms of resistance amongst your peers, a shared glance of understanding, joke in the servants' hall, a moment of shared silence that speaks volumes. These are the quiet conversations of the unseen, subtle currents that flow beneath the polished surface of Victorian domesticity. As the days continue their relentless march, yourself anticipating the next quiet moment, the next opportunity to nurture this nascent spark of your own agency, though unseen, has become a constant, reassuring presence, a whisper of a life lived on your own terms, fleetingly. This small act of keeping a forgotten treasure is a seed planted, a promise of resilience that will continue to grow in the shadows. You wonder what other hidden stories, other smalls of quiet courage, lie waiting to be discovered within the vast, intricate tapestry of this era. Shape your own understanding of what it truly means to be a woman in this time. Tonight, experience history not from textbooks, but from the inside. We've glimpsed the meticulous routines, the hushed anxieties, almost imperceptible acts of self-preservation that defined a Victorian maid's existence. Now, into the cumulative weight of it all, the slow erosion of spirit and body under the constant, adding pressure of expectation. Imagine yourself as Mary, a young woman navigating the labyrinthine corridors of a grand London townhouse in the late 1880s. Perhaps a Tuesday in October, chill of autumn begins to seep into every stone. The gas lamps, even in daylight, cast an ethereal, flickering glow, a constant reminder of the artificiality of the world you inhabit, world built on the polished surfaces and carefully constructed illusions of the gentry. Becomes familiar as the ache in your lower back transforms from a sharp jab to a dull, persistent throb. Penina, a silent testament to the hours spent scrubbing, polishing, and bending. Your hands, once soft and unblemished, but are now perpetually chapped and red, the skin roughened by lye soap and endless rinsing. You can feel the calluses forming, insensitive, a protective layer against the daily assault of work, a barrier between you and the delicate things you are tasked to care for. Beeswax and lemon polish has become ingrained in your very being, perfumed shroud that clings to your simple grey serge uniform. Even when you're finally allowed a moment's respite, the scullery fire, the phantom smell of disinfectant lingers. The weight of expectation isn't just physical, a constant hum of anxiety in the back of your mind. Every task, no matter how small, carries the potential for disapproval. On the silver, a misplaced cushion in the drawing room, a slightly too loud sigh as you carry out an order. Any of these could earn you a sharp word from Mrs. Abernathy, the housekeeper, a dismissive glance from the mistress of the house, Lady Ashworth herself. You've learned to anticipate their needs with a preternatural awareness of their comings and goings, their moods swinging like the heavy velvet curtains in the main hall. Is exhausting, a mental marathon run without end. You replay conversations in your head, dissecting every inflection, searching for hidden meanings, for signs of impending displeasure. It's a form of self-inflicted torture, born of the knowledge that your livelihood, your very place in this world, depends on your ability to remain invisible, efficient, compliant. I discovered in archives, in the brittle pages of a diary belonging to a maid named Eliza, similar household in Kensington in 1892, that this pervasive anxiety was a shared experience. Eliza writes of sleepless nights, her mind racing with the fear of making a mistake, of the imagined consequences. She describes the peculiar sensation of walking on eggshells within her own home, a sentiment that resonates deeply with the silent struggles of countless women in service. The pressure to maintain an outward appearance of calm and competence, even when your insides are churning with dread. Remarkable feat of emotional fortitude. You learn to school your features, a placid expression even when your heart is pounding. This constant suppression of genuine emotion is perhaps one of the most insidious aspects of the job, a slow draining of your authentic self. Conversations you have are brief, functional exchanges often conducted in hushed tones in the servants' quarters. A hurried question about dinner, a shared complaint about the cold, a whispered piece of gossip about the family's latest visitor. Exchange a few words with Davison, the footman, a man whose quiet competence is as comforting as it is distant. A rough day, Mary, as you pass him in the hallway, conveying a shared understanding of the relentless demands. You'll offer a tired smile and a nod. You have no idea, unspoken but understood, these fleeting moments of connection, however brief, lanes in the isolating world of domestic service. They are reminders that you are not alone in your struggle, that others share this burden. It's a silent solidarity forged in shared exhaustion and the common enemy of the demanding household. Opulent surroundings you inhabit, the gilded mirrors reflecting your weary face, the plush carpets muffling your footsteps, they all serve as a stark contrast to your own inner state. Surrounded by beauty and luxury, yet you are denied its simple pleasures. You polish the family's silver, spoon gleaming under your ministrations, but you eat your own meals from chipped earthenware, often cold and unappetizing. Out silken gowns and crisp linen shirts, but your own uniform is rough, coarse, and mended countless times. This disparity, this constant awareness of what you serve but can never possess, breeds a subtle resentment, ache for a life that feels perpetually out of reach, feeling not unlike the modern experience of scrolling through social media, curated perfection while grappling with your own imperfect reality. The contrast is sharp, the yearning palpable. Your sleep, when it finally comes, the exhaustion is profound, a bone, deep weariness that sleep only partially alleviates. Dream of falling, of being chased, or of simply being unable to move, your limbs heavy as lead. The sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the distant chime of a clock, voices from the family's rooms intrude even into your slumber, keeping your senses on a low, alert hum. Sheer physical exertion, coupled with the constant mental strain, leaves you perpetually on the verge of collapse. Find yourself pausing more often, leaning against door frames for support, your breath coming in shallow gasps. Vibrancy of youth is slowly being leached away, replaced by a premature weariness. The weight of expectations is a heavy cloak, woven from duty, fear, and the relentless demands of a social hierarchy. It presses down on your shoulders, bows your head, saps the very life force from your being. You are a cog in a grand, intricate machine, and your purpose is to function smoothly, silently, complaint. Yet, even the most resilient machine can eventually falter under perpetual strain. This constant pressure is gradually wearing you down, and the question that begins to whisper in the quiet moments is not if you will break. This relentless grind is setting the stage for a pivotal moment, a point where the accumulated pressure will inevitably seek an outlet. Carefully constructed facade of compliance will begin to crack. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to truly experience life in this distant time, to breathe the cold-tinged air of London in 1888, wool of a maid's uniform against your skin, to taste the watery gruel that sustained so many. walked through the endless days, the back-breaking labor, the gnawing hunger, the quiet desperation that defined the existence of women like Mary, our imagined maid in the Ashworth household. Cycle of scrubbing, polishing, and serving, the constant deference, the ever-present fear of reprimand, chill of the unheated attic room, the sting of lye soap on your raw hands, settled deep in your bones after a 14-hour day. You've heard the rustle of silk gowns, the clinking of crystal, pronouncements of the master of the house, all from a respectful distance, always in service. You've smelled the beeswax polish, perfume of the ladies, the ever-present scent of damp wool and coal smoke. You've learned the subtle language of glances, unspoken hierarchy, the crushing weight of a life lived in service. We've glimpsed the small acts of defiance, the quiet moments of solace found in shared whispers with fellow servants, the fleeting joy of a stolen hour with a book few could afford. But tonight we approach the precipice. Tonight we witness the breaking point, teach you that even the most stoic spirit can be worn down by the relentless erosion of dignity. For Mary, the breaking point wasn't a single cataclysmic event, but rather the further back we go, realize how much courage ordinary life required. For a young woman like Mary, Rinthine social strat of 1888 London, each dawn was a fresh battle. Servants' quarters of the Ashworth townhouse on Grosvenor Square, the first sliver of light pierced the grimy dormer window, was thick with the stale scent of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint, lingering aroma of yesterday's boiled cabbage. You wake not to the gentle chirping of birds, but to the jarring clang of the scullery bell, a summons that brooks no delay. Your fingers, stiff and raw from scrubbing the previous day's extensive list of chores, polishing the silver until it gleamed like a captured sun, rugs until dust clouds billowed like ancient fogs, arranging the elaborate floral displays in the drawing room ache with a dull, persistent throb. Linen of your chemist chafes against your skin, a constant reminder of your station. As the seasons change, too does the weight of expectation pressing down on your young shoulders. Today, the pressure feels particularly suffocating. The Ashworths' whims for nearly 3 years, a silent, unseen cog in their opulent machine. Lady Ashworth, pursed lips and eyes that dissected your every movement, is a constant source of anxiety. Mr. Ashworth, often absent, returns with a gruff impatience, his presence demanding an immediate deference that leaves you feeling hollowed out. And their children, spoiled Miss Eleanor and the boisterous Master Thomas, treat you less as a human being and more as an animated doll, prone to fetching and carrying. To the breaking point you realize with a chilling clarity isn't a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, internal crumbling. It arrived not with a bang, but with the subtle, insidious erosion of your spirit. The memory of the previous evening still prickles at your consciousness. Tasked with tidying Master Thomas's study after he'd retired, a room usually off limits. Scattered papers and overturned ink pots, you'd found a small, leather-bound diary. Curiosity, a dangerous indulgence for a maid, better view the pages, filled with Master Thomas's surprisingly eloquent, albeit childish, observations, travel of a world beyond the confines of Grosvenor Square, of a desire for something in more. The vastness of the oceans, the exotic spices of the East, and the thrill of discovery. And then you'd stumbled upon a passage that had struck you with the force of a physical blow. Papa says a gentleman must always have ambition. But what are those who serve? Do they not also have souls that yearn? It was a simple question, unspoken ache in your own heart. You'd quickly replaced the diary your hands trembling, the words seared into your mind. You, too, yearned later that night as you lay on your straw-filled mattress in the cramped attic room. From the street below, casting long, dancing shadows, you overheard a conversation from the master's bedroom. Was speaking to her husband, her voice sharp and dismissive. Abernathy is requesting advance again, Charles. Honestly, man is utterly unreliable. We shall have to find a new butler by the spring, I'm afraid. And the new maid, the one from Kent, she's dreadfully clumsy. Dropped a whole tray of tea things this morning. Such a waste of good porcelain. You listen, in your stomach. Your own position, precarious at best, felt even more so. The thought of being dismissed to the workhouse or facing the uncertain streets sent a shiver down your spine. Yet, beneath the fear, sensation was stirring a defiant ember of self-preservation. You recall a conversation you'd had with Mrs. Davison, the cook, woman whose gruff exterior hid a surprising well of empathy. It was during a rare moment of respite, peeling potatoes in the steamy scullery, the rhythmic scraping of the knife a comforting sound. This life, Mary, she'd said, grinds you down, bit by bit. You see the fine silks and the glittering jewels, but you never touch them. You serve the rich food, but you eat gruel. It's a life of service, yes, but it can also be a life of slow surrender. She'd paused, hands on her apron, her gaze distant. Don't let it steal your spirit, child. There's always a choice, hard one. Mrs. Davison, a widow who'd toiled in kitchens for 40 years, had never had the luxury of choice. Those resonated deeply. The cumulative toll of the job, as we've seen in previous subparts, had been immense. Your hands, soft and smooth, were now calloused and perpetually stained. The perpetual stooping, carrying of heavy coal scuttles and water buckets had begun to affect your posture. The lack of proper nourishment required to avoid reprimand had left you perpetually fatigued. Sleep offered little true respite before the cycle began anew. The very air in the grand rooms, perfumed with expensive flowers and polished wood, felt suffocatingly heavy, a stark contrast to the crisp, clean air you remembered from your childhood village. You felt invisible, the opulent halls. Today, standing before the full-length mirror in your tiny attic room, recognized the reflection. The young woman staring back was gaunt, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion, her shoulders hunched. The simple cotton dress, though impeccably clean, did little to disguise the weariness etched onto her features. But as you looked closer, fatigue, you saw something else, a flicker of resolve. The diary, Master Thomas's words, Mrs. They coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. You could not continue like this. You would not. Event that pushed you to this precipice wasn't a single or dramatic incident, but the accumulation of countless small indignities. The way Lady Ashworth had casually dismissed your efforts to mend a torn lace curtain, utterly inadequate. It was the overheard conversation about a new maid, a subtle threat to your own livelihood, sheer soul-crushing monotony of it all, the endless repetition of tasks that yielded no personal satisfaction, the gnawing realization that your dreams of a life beyond this service were slowly being extinguished. Your worn carpet bag, a humble possession containing your meager belongings, a change of clothes, a small, dog-eared prayer book, wildflower pressed between the pages of a penny novel. You tie your bonnet strings securely, fabric a familiar sensation. The floorboards creak softly as you step out of your room. The silence of the pre-dawn house, a stark contrast to the usual clatter. You move with a newfound purpose, the furtive stealth of a thief, but with the quiet determination of someone reclaiming her own life. The grand staircase, the usually a symbol of the Ashworth's wealth and your servitude, now feels like a pathway to freedom. You descend, beating a steady rhythm against your ribs. You pass the kitchen, the faint smell of yeast from the rising bread a comforting, sweet reminder of Mrs. Davison. You pause at the scullery door, silent thank you offered to the woman who had offered you a sliver of hope. You imagine her, even now, preparing for another day of thankless labor, and a pang of guilt mixes with your resolve. The heavy oak door that leads to the outside world, you pause. You glance back at the silent aid of the Ashworth townhouse. It represents a life of security, of a roof over your head, of regular meals, representative of surrender, of lost dreams, of a spirit slowly fading. You think of the vastness of London, teeming with possibilities, and the terrifying uncertainty of what lies ahead. It's a leap into the unknown with your future, but for the first time in a long time, you feel a sense of agency, a sense of control over your own destiny bites at your cheeks as you step onto Grosvenor Square. The gas lamps cast pools of light, cobblestone street. The city is stirring, a distant hum of activity growing louder. You pull your shawl tighter, promise to yourself echoing in the quiet pre-dawn air, you will not be defined by servitude. You will find your own path, destiny. This decision, made in the quiet solitude of your attic room, is not just an escape, it is an act of profound courage to the enduring strength of the human spirit, even in the most constrained of circumstances. Our leaving behind is a stark reminder of the realities faced by so many, a life many today would find unimaginable. As you begin to walk, the weight of your bag a familiar burden, you know this is only the beginning. The path ahead will be fraught with challenges, with uncertainty, and with the ever-present need for resilience. But for the first time, Mary, walking towards a horizon of your own choosing. The next step, as you venture out into the vastness of London, explore the immediate aftermath of such a bold decision and the unforeseen consequences that await. Settles around you now. Imagine darkness that meant something completely different. Not the gentle dimming of electric lights, the hush that falls with the click of a switch. This was the profound, absolute absence of light, the kind that pressed in on your eyeballs. Question if they still worked. This was the darkness of a London night in 1888, before widespread gaslight glow began to tentatively push back the shadows. You stand in a narrow alleyway off Whitechapel Road, the decision made, stifling life of Mrs. Ashworth's household irrevocably behind you. The air is thick with the acrid tang of coal smoke, scent of horse dung, and something else, something damp and vaguely metallic. You can feel the rough and even cobbles beneath your thin, worn soles, a stark contrast to the polished floorboards you're accustomed to. Your heart hammers a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a drumbeat of both terror and a strange, exhilarating freedom. The gas lamp at the end of the alley casts a weak, flickering halo, barely illuminating the slick, greasy walls that seem to weep with condensation. The silence isn't truly silent. It's punctuated by the distant rumble of a cart, the sharp bark of a stray dog, and the murmur of voices from a nearby public house, a sound that feels both inviting and menacing. Surely, the weight of your choice begins to settle. You clutch the small pouch containing your meager savings, a few shillings and pence painstakingly squirreled away from your wages, sum that suddenly feels both impossibly large and woefully inadequate. You remember the hushed conversations you'd overheard between the other maids, tales of women who'd left service with nothing but the clothes on their backs, only to find themselves on the streets. and vulnerable. Mary, the scullery maid, had once spoken of her cousin, who tried to make her way as a seamstress in the East End. Swallowed by the unforgiving city, the thought chills you, a cold seep that has nothing to do with the damp night air. You can almost feel the phantom touch of Mrs. Ashworth's disapproving gaze, hear Papa Abernathy's disappointed sigh. Miles away, in a life that feels like another existence entirely, you take a deep, shaky breath, coal smoke stinging your lungs. This is not the romantic adventure you might have imagined in your stolen moments with a tattered copy of Jane Eyre. This is raw survival. You recall the conversation you'd had with Mrs. Davison, the cook, just that morning. Her face, roadmap of worry lines, had softened with a rare flicker of sympathy as you'd confessed your intentions. "Child," she'd said, her voice low and gravelly, stirring pot of what smelled like mutton broth. "Ain't always a gilded cage. Sometimes it's just a wider one with more wolves outside." You'd nodded, the suffocating weight of expectation, the endless cycle of dusting, scrubbing and obeying, of being invisible yet constantly scrutinized. You'd thought of the burgeoning suffragette movement, of women demanding more than just a domestic sphere, but that felt like a distant, intellectual pursuit. Your reality was far more immediate: the gnawing hunger, the aching feet, the constant fear of falling ill and losing your position. You'd chosen to leave, not for political ideals, but for the simple need to breathe air that wasn't thick with subservience. You step out of the alley, gaslight catching the glint of a discarded gin bottle on the pavement, is alive with a different kind of energy than the quiet, ordered halls of the Ashworth residence. Hawkers shout their wares, raucous chorus. A group of men, their faces smudged with grime and exhaustion, spill out of a public house, coarse and loud. You instinctively pull your shawl tighter, trying to make yourself smaller, less noticeable. You know you need to find lodgings, a safe place to rest and plan your next move. The Salvation Army shelters were often full. Hosses, the thought of the workhouse sent a shiver down your spine. I discovered in archives that in 1888, with no demonstrable skills or family connections, faced a precarious existence. Wage for a domestic servant who found work outside of service was often lower than in service, and the competition was fierce. Slowly but surely you begin to walk, your steps hesitant but determined. Dimly lit shops displaying everything from cheap ribbons to second-hand boots. The smells are overwhelming: the sweet scent of cheap perfume mingled with the sharp aroma of vinegar from a pickle cellar, smell of potatoes piled high on a cart. You see a woman, her face gaunt and her eyes hollow, selling matches on a street corner. Tattered dress offers little protection against the chill, and you feel a pang of recognition, a shared vulnerability. Reality lies beyond the polite facade of Victorian society, the underbelly that most of the well-to-do studiously ignored. You remember reading in a newspaper clipping, procured surreptitiously from Mr. Ashworth's study, the appalling conditions in some of the lodging houses, where as many as 6 people might share a single cramped room. Yourself drawn to the glow of a slightly more reputable establishment, with a sign that proclaims clean and respectable lodgings. The proprietor, faced woman with tightly pinned grey hair, eyes you up and down with a mixture of suspicion and appraisal. Dress and the slight tremor in your hands are not lost on her. "A room?" she asks, her voice devoid of warmth. You nod. Fee, fumbling for your coins, she names a price that makes your stomach clench, but you have no other options. You pay a significant portion of your savings and are shown to a small, sparsely furnished room at the top of the house. The mattress thin and lumpy, and a single grimy window overlooks a narrow courtyard. Yet, close the door behind you, a profound sense of relief washes over you. You have shelter, you have a moment's peace. That you sit on the edge of the bed, the rough wool of the blanket scratching against your skin. Silence in this room is different from the alley. It's a silence of isolation, of being utterly alone. Hear the muffled sounds of other lives unfolding around you. A cough from the next room, the creak of floorboards above, the future. The daunting task of finding work, of making a living in this vast, indifferent city. Find employment as a seamstress, as Mary's cousin had tried, or perhaps in a shop, or even as a governess. Formal education would likely preclude that. The possibilities, while numerous, are all tinged with uncertainty. Your decision to leave service wasn't an end, but a beginning, a plunge into a sea of unknowns. Slowly but surely, to undress, the rough fabric of your dress feeling like a second skin that you're shedding. The face with the cold water from the pitcher, the shock of it momentarily clearing your head. You look at your reflection in the small, tarnished mirror. Your face is thinner than it was a few months ago, shadowed with fatigue. Yet there's a new spark there, a flicker of resilience. The suffocating routine of service, the quiet desperation. Now, you face a different kind of struggle, one that demands a different kind of courage. You remember the historical accounts of women who, in times of great societal upheaval, carve out their own destinies, often through sheer grit and ingenuity. You pull the thin blanket around you, sounds of the boarding house, a lullaby of the uncertain future. Tomorrow, you will begin again, and as you drift towards sleep, that the lessons learned in the quiet, suffocating halls of Mrs. Ashworth's home will serve you well in the noisy world outside. The path ahead is fraught with peril, but for the first time in a long time, it is a path you are choosing for yourself. Forget what you've learned from period dramas. The truth is far more fascinating. You've stepped through the looking glass, leaving behind the comfort of your modern notions of work and life, and you're standing here, dimly lit corridors of a grand Victorian townhouse circa 1875 in Kensington, London. The air itself feels different. The scent of coal, smoke, beeswax polish, and the faint, persistent aroma of damp wool. Your journey, as we've explored in the preceding parts, wasn't a gentle one. A plunge into a world where the very fabric of existence was woven from hard labor, relentless duty, and a social hierarchy so rigid it felt as immutable as stone. You chose to step into the shoes of someone like Mary, a scullery maid, a lady's maid, understanding that the romanticized image presented on screen is a pale, often inaccurate, reflection of the arduous reality. We've glimpsed the sheer physical toll, the lack of personal autonomy, present threat of destitution that defined the lives of these women. Notions you might have harbored have been steadily stripped away, revealing the raw, unvarnished truth. Your understanding deepens as you recall the sheer exhaustion that permeated every waking moment, the gnawing hunger that was a constant companion, profound loneliness that settled in the quiet hours after the household finally slept, fleeting historical curiosity. It's about grasping the sheer grit and resilience required to simply survive, find a sliver of contentment in a world that offered so little. Understanding deepens as we revisit the very core of this existence, the relentless grind that would have broken you. Imagining waking before dawn, the chill of the unheated servants' quarters seeping into your bones. Your hands, raw and chapped from endless scrubbing, would have fumbled with coarse linen, the rough texture a constant. reminder of your station, the scent of stale air with the lingering odor of yesterday's cooking, often boiled cabbage and suet pudding, would have filled your nostrils. You dress quickly in your uniform, a drab, serviceable cotton dress, perhaps a grey or brown, white apron tied tightly around your waist. This apron, a symbol of cleanliness and duty, shield against the grime you were constantly battling, your mind, even in these early moments, racing through the day's tasks. There were no leisurely mornings, no gentle easing into the day. Was often lighting the fires. In the grand houses, this meant carefully coaxing flames to life in multiple fireplaces, ensuring warmth for the family upstairs. The soot would have coated your hands and face, a mark of your labor. Then came the washing, shower, but hours spent over steaming basins, the water scalding hot, the soap harsh and lye heavy. You'd be washing not just your own meager belongings, but the family's undergarments, their linens, their delicate silks. Laundry was astonishing. A single dinner party could generate dozens of napkins, tablecloths, fine china that needed meticulous hand washing. I discovered in archives from the 1880s workload of a large London household that the laundry alone could consume 3 full days a week, requiring immense physical strength and stamina. Your understanding deepens as we consider the food. For the family, it was a lavish affair and status. For you, the servants, it was a stark contrast. You would eat what was left over, simpler, plainer fare. This often meant a thick gruel for breakfast, perhaps a piece of bread and cheese for lunch, a pie made from cheaper cuts of meat and root vegetables for dinner. The nutritional value was questionable. Monotony, soul-crushing. Imagine the taste of watery broth, the blandness of boiled potatoes, the occasional anticipated treat of a leftover pastry. The smell of baking bread from the kitchen meant for the family's table a constant temptation, a reminder of what you were denied. The social interactions, too, were fraught with unspoken rules. You would rarely speak to the family except when directly addressed, and then only with deference and respect. Be seen but not heard, a silent, efficient cog in the household machinery. Conversations with other servants were limited, confined to the brief moments between tasks. There was a hierarchy even amongst the staff. The housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, stern woman with a perpetual frown etched onto her face, held considerable sway. A single misstep, a dropped plate, perceived laziness, and her sharp reprimands would echo through the corridors. From a former maid who described Mrs. Abernathy as having eyes like a hawk, missing nothing. Your understanding deepens when you consider the sheer lack of privacy. Your bedroom, shared with several other maids. Small and cramped, the beds often narrow and uncomfortable. The conversations whispered in the dark, the shared anxieties, moments of camaraderie, were a lifeline in this often isolating existence. Yet, even these private moments were subject to the watchful eye of the housekeeper or the mistress of the house. There was no personal space, sanctuary where you could truly be yourself. Let's imagine a specific scenario, a moment that encapsulates the relentless pressure. In June 1888, the Ashworth family is hosting a small afternoon tea for a few guests. You, as a junior maid, bringing the tea tray upstairs. The tray is heavy, laden with delicate porcelain cups, a silver teapot, a milk jug, sugar bowl, selection of sandwiches and cakes. The stairs are steep, polished wood that gleams under the gaslight. Your heart pounds as you ascend. For the precious cargo, you hear the murmur of conversation from the drawing room, the tinkling of laughter. Pause at the door, take a deep breath and enter. The air is perfumed with roses and fine French perfume. Lady Ashworth, formidable presence, gestures imperiously towards a small table. As you carefully place the tray down, your hand trembles slightly. Single delicate cucumber sandwich slips from its neatly arranged position. Lady Ashworth's gaze snaps to you, marring with disapproval. Marry, she says, her voice cool and cutting. Expect better precision from you. Your cheeks flush with embarrassment, the weight of her disappointment a physical burden. A mumbled apology, your hands clammy, and retreat, the sting of her words, a sharp reminder of your precarious position. Evening, you might confide in another maid, perhaps Davison, about the incident. She makes it sound like I've committed a crime. You might sigh of the day and the sting of the rebuke mingling into a bitter cocktail. Davison, with a knowing nod, might reply, "That's just how it is, dear. We're expected to be invisible, and when we're not, when we make a mistake, the world stops, the monsters." Your understanding deepens as we reflect on the physical toll. The constant bending, lifting, taken a severe toll on your body. Back itches, aching joints, and swollen hands were common ailments. Proper sanitation and the close living quarters also meant that illness could spread quickly. A simple cold could escalate into something far more serious, with little access to proper medical care. Falling ill was ever present, for sickness often meant dismissal, and dismissal meant destitution. Reality you would have faced, the polite nods, the carefully curated smiles of the family, grand architecture of the house, all of it was built upon the unseen, unacknowledged labor of women like you. You wouldn't last a day, you wouldn't last an hour. The sheer, unremitting physical and emotional pressure, the lack of autonomy, the constant fear, profound loneliness, the gnawing hunger, the cold, it's a stark contrast to the romanticized portrayals. This was a life of survival, leisure, or even simple comfort. You've glimpsed the surface, the polished veneer, understand the immense strength it took to maintain that facade day in and day out, with so little in return. The resilience required was extraordinary, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Brings us to the precipice of what happens when that endurance finally, inevitably, begins to waver. Evidence tells us stories that Hollywood never bothered to explore. Whispers from the very earth beneath our feet. Lived in the shadows of grandeur. You stand in a reconstructed Victorian scullery, the air thick with the phantom scent of coal smoke and lye soap. The rough, hewn stone floor is cold, even through the thin soles of your modern shoes. Your eyes trace the worn grooves in the scrubbed pine table, imagining the ceaseless, breaking work that shaped these surfaces. It's not the rustle of silk gowns or the clinking of crystal that echoes here, rhythmic swish of a broom, the scrape of a bucket, the quiet sigh of exhaustion. This is the unvarnished truth, a reality far removed from the romanticized portrayals that often dominate our understanding of the past. The stark realities of their days, the relentless demands, the utter lack of personal agency. Now, understanding settles, we move towards a deeper appreciation, a respect born not of awe at noble deeds, profound empathy for the quiet fortitude of everyday survival. With each passing moment, the air in this imagined space grows heavier, with the unspoken narratives of those who served. You can almost feel the damp chill seeping into your bones. Of wool could truly ward off in the drafty service quarters of a large estate like Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, a more modest yet equally demanding townhouse in Bloomsbury. Imagine the sheer physicality of it all. Endless bending, lifting, scrubbing. Your own muscles ache in sympathy, a phantom soreness from tasks you've never truly performed. Basin before you, smelling faintly of rust and damp, becomes a portal. You picture Mary, a girl of perhaps 16 in 1888, raw and chapped from the harsh lye soap used to clean the master's morning suit. Her fingers, roughened and stained, polished the silver until it gleamed, a task requiring hours of meticulous attention. Spoon a testament to her unwavering diligence. Her day began long before dawn, perhaps at 5 a.m., to light the kitchen fires, breakfast for the family and the rest of the staff. And then the endless cycle would begin. You recall the research you stumbled upon in the archives of the London Metropolitan Archives, a diary entry from a housekeeper named Mrs. 1895. She wrote with a surprising clarity about the management of her staff, a small team of 4 maids in a respectable Kensington residence. Young Thomas, the footman, is proving most reliable. She noted, the kitchen maid still struggles with the speed required for the midday meal. She must be reminded that the mistress expects the vegetables to be perfectly peeled, no speck of dirt remaining, to be crystal clear. A moment's inattention can lead to displeasure, to a less comfortable life for us all. This wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about maintaining a facade domestic environment that reflected the status and wealth of the employers. Maids were the invisible gears that kept this elaborate machine running. Their own needs, sleep, food, often were secondary, often entirely ignored. A simple meal of bread and cheese, perhaps a thin gruel. Sustenance, often eaten standing up in the scullery. The smell of cooking for the family, a constant, tantalizing reminder of their place. With each passing moment, you begin to understand the sheer mental fortitude required. It wasn't just about following orders, it was about anticipating needs, about maintaining an unruffled demeanor even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm. Imagine Abernathy, the butler, whose very presence commanded silence and respect even from the younger maids. Picture him in the grand hall of a country estate, the afternoon sun streaming through the tall, mullioned windows, dust motes dancing in the air. He would be instructing a new scullery maid, a girl of 14, who had left her village in Yorkshire for the first time. Remember, child, his voice low and measured, the hushed space. Your appearance reflects upon this household. Your cap must be starched, your apron spotless. Enter a room where the family is present. You avert your gaze. You are seen, but you do not see. Your purpose is to serve. Quiet efficiency. The weight of those words, the unspoken expectation of absolute obedience and invisibility, burden for a young girl so far from home. You notice the worn patches on the wooden dresser in this recreated scullery, beeswax polish clinging to the air. This is where linens would be folded, where the precious few personal items of the maids might be kept if they were fortunate enough to have any. Your internal monologue shifts of stark reality to a burgeoning respect. You think of Papa, who always said that true strength lay not in shouting, quiet endurance. This was the quiet endurance of generations of domestic staff. They were the backbone of Victorian society, essential services that allowed the upper and middle classes to flourish, to engage in politics, arts, and leisure. Their lives, often hidden from view, were fundamental to the functioning of the era. The sanitation systems we take for granted, readily available clean water, the food prepared and served, all of it was made possible by their labor, is a far cry from the romanticized image of a rosy, cheeked maiden content with her lot. This is a story of resilience, of survival, found not in grand pronouncements, but in the steadfast performance of duty, day after day, year after year. Passing moment, your perspective broadens. The limited options available to women of the lower classes in the 19th century. For many, domestic service was one of the few respectable avenues for employment. It offered the promise of a roof over one's head and regular meals. Meals were meager and the work punishing. The alternative was often factory work, with its own set of dangers and grueling hours, or worse, destitution. This isn't to excuse the harshness of the conditions, contextualize them within the limited social and economic realities of the time. You recall a particular passage from a social history of London, living conditions in the servants' quarters of a large Mayfair mansion around 1870. The maids would sleep in small, vegetated attic, the air thick with the smell of damp plaster and coal dust. The beds were narrow, the mattresses thin. Respite after a 16-hour workday. The shared privy, located at the end of the corridor, constant source of potential discomfort and illness. You can almost hear the distant sounds from the main house, the laughter of children, the murmur of conversation, the strains of a piano concerto. These sounds, so alien to the quiet utilitarian world of the scullery, served as a constant reminder of the social chasm that separated them. With its conveniences and personal freedoms, feels impossibly distant. You think of your own hands, uncalloused, and a pang of something akin to gratitude, or perhaps guilt, washes over you. The historical record, in its dry, as a powerful antidote to romanticism. It reminds you that behind every grand facade, every opulent drawing room, unseen hands, performing essential tasks with a dedication that is, in its own way, profoundly admirable. Yourself thinking about the quiet strength of Mary, of Emily, of the countless others whose names are lost to time. Labor shaped the world we inhabit. Their stories, etched into the very fabric of our history, deserve not just our attention, our deepest respect. This understanding, this empathy, is perhaps the most valuable lesson we can glean from the past. Reminder that the foundations of our present are built on the often unseen efforts of those who came before. Imagined light in the scullery begins to fade, leaving you with the quiet hum of reflection, a newfound appreciation for the silent, uncelebrated service that once defined so many lives. You've seen the movies, the books, but the lived reality was something else entirely. As the final embers of our exploration into the world of the Victorian maid begin to fade, it's time to settle into a deeper understanding, profound empathy. You've walked through the echoing halls of grand houses, felt the chill of the scullery, distant clatter of the city beyond the thick walls. You've glimpsed the relentless routine, the quiet dignity, and the sheer endurance required. Now, as the narrative draws to a close, allow yourself to sink into the quiet of the evening. Weight of their stories settle upon you like a soft, worn blanket. Imagine the scent of beeswax polish and coal smoke, murmur of voices from downstairs, the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock marking the slow passage of time. This isn't just about history, it's about the human experience distilled into the everyday lives of those who often went unseen. Contributions as vital as the air you breathe. Experience becomes your teacher. Think back to Mary, roughened by lye, soap and starch, her back perpetually aching from bending over washtubs and scrubbing floors. A pre-dawn morning, the only illumination a sputtering candle casting long shadows across the stone flags of the kitchen. Air would be thick with the damp chill of the cellar and the metallic tang of yesterday's ashes. Gibby, dressed in her coarse linen apron over a plain, dark cotton dress, her hair neatly pinned beneath a simple cap. Her breakfast, if she was lucky, would be a hunk of stale bread and weak tea consumed quickly before the demands of the day began. Half her tasks, unseen in most historical dramas, was immense. Lifting heavy coal scuttles, carrying buckets of water from the pump, polishing endless acres of brass and silver. These were not gentle exercises, breaking muscle, straining labor, performed day in and day out, often with little respite. In the archives of the London Metropolitan Archives, a diary fragment from a certain Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth, dated 1888, constant complaints of her housekeeper regarding the unseemly strength required of the new kitchen maid, girl named Clara, who struggled to lift the largest pots. This wasn't melodrama, it was the stark reality of physical exertion, the social isolation, a subtle but pervasive hardship. While the grand houses hummed with activity, the laughter of children, tones of conversation in the drawing room, the bustling symphony of the kitchen, the maids themselves often existed in a separate sphere, primarily with their fellow servants, a shared camaraderie forged in the crucible of common experience. Yet, even within this hierarchy, there were distinctions. The housemaids, the kitchen maids, the scullery maids, each had their place, duties, and their own social strata. A conversation overheard between Abernathy, the stern butler, and Davison, housekeeper, in the year 1875 revealed the careful management of staff. Maids do not fraternize excessively with the tradesmen during deliveries, Davison. It leads to impropriety. This wasn't about malice, but about maintaining order and a strict separation of classes. His world was confined to the service quarters, the attics, the laundry rooms, spaces often devoid of natural light and fresh air. After the last candle was extinguished and the final bolts secured, were often spent in quiet conversation, mending clothes, worn Bible. Imagine the scent of lamp oil, the faint musty smell of the attic dormitory fabric as they prepared for rest. Their social lives, if you can call them that, were largely confined to these shared spaces. Contrast to the vibrant social whirl of the families they served. Experience becomes your teacher. Let's delve into the emotional landscape, the constant pressure to be invisible yet ever present, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, even and unflustered, even in the face of exhaustion or harsh criticism. It demanded an extraordinary emotional resilience. Quiet mortification of dropping a precious porcelain teacup, the fear of Papa's wrath, the sting of a sharp reprimand from the mistress of the house. These were not trivial occurrences. They could mean wages, position, and the terrifying prospect of destitution. The internal monologue of a maid, unheard by her employers, a constant stream of anxieties, hopes, and quiet prayers. Please be in a good mood today, she might have whispered to herself as she smoothed her apron. Or perhaps a flicker of longing. I could have a moment to sit by the window and watch the carriages pass. This emotional labor, the constant management of one's own feelings to maintain a placid exterior, was as taxing as any physical chore. Skill honed through necessity, a vital tool for survival in a world that offered little room for personal expression. The stoicism required was immense, a stark contrast to the open emotional displays common today. We express our frustrations, our joys, our anxieties with relative freedom. For a Victorian maid, such openness could be a dangerous liability. Archaeological evidence tells us stories that Hollywood never bothered to explore, whispers from the very fabric of their lives. The meager possessions found in servants' quarters, a worn wooden comb, a single faded ribbon, a tiny hand-stitched sampler. Just objects. They were tangible links to individual lives, to personal histories often erased by the grand narratives of their employers. Research I conducted into the estate records of the Abernathy family, for instance, revealed a meticulous inventory of every item. Personal effects of the domestic staff upon their departure. Amongst these were items of surprising sentimentality: a small, crudely carved bird, a lock of hair tied with a simple thread. Small treasures offered a glimpse into the private world of these women, their capacity for love, for memory, quiet appreciation of beauty, even amidst the drudgery. It's a reminder that behind the uniform, behind the endless tasks, a human being with a rich inner life, a life as complex and meaningful as any of the aristocracy they served. Flicker, and the city outside begins to settle into its nocturnal rhythm. Does our journey into the past draw to a close? You've glimpsed a world of relentless work, of quiet endurance, of hidden lives. You've felt the weight of their responsibilities, the chill of their dormitories, coal, smoke, and beeswax that permeated their existence. This isn't just a historical footnote, reminder of the human spirit, its capacity for resilience, and the often unseen foundations upon which societies are built. As you drift towards slumber, let the echoes of their lives become a gentle lullaby to the strength and dignity of those who served and who, in their own way, shaped the world we inhabit today. And the past is a vast ocean, but for tonight we rest, carrying the quiet wisdom of the Victorian maid with us into the land of dreams.